So hey guys, how are you all? Welcome to. So we are back with a brand new movie on what if Naruto had age of 5 relation with Dxd Fem girl movie, but before we start, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Now let's begin the story. It was a lovely spring morning in the city of Kyoto. The sun was shining, the birds chirping, all those cheesy things that have been used to describe a good morning. Already many people were out and about, from students rushing to get to class on time to business folk on their way to work. In a small yet cozy little apartment though, the morning was only just getting started as the loud beeping of an alarm clock rang out in the bedroom. Muffled grumbling rang out from the tangled mess of blankets laying on top of the bed before an arm covered in soft orange and black striped fur managed to work its way out. Grasping around blindly for a few moments, the fluffy digits eventually found themselves wrapped around the source of the noise. Crunch and promptly squeezed it until the poor thing crumpled into a pile of crushed plastic. It's too early, the owner of the limb grumbled, their voice deep and sensual with a soft accent, as they sat up. Tossing the broken clock into the trash, their hand reached up to pull the blanket off and thus reveal the face of a lovely young woman. She was a tiger yokai with deep orange fur accented with solid black strips and soft white covering the bottom half of her face up to her nose. A pair of round ears sat atop her head, one idly flicking around as she rubbed one of her vibrant green eyes tiredly, and long length hair that was done up in 2 loose ponytails hung to her shoulders. Stretching her arms in the air, small but sharp ebony black claws briefly popped free before sinking back while more of the blanket fell away to reveal her bare chest, her breast bouncing a little from each move she made. Shaking off the last few vestiges of sleep, the femme fatale feline grumbled something inaudible under her breath while grabbing the bundle of blankets beside her and giving it a shake. Come on Naruto, if I've got to be up this early then so do you. Alright, I'm up, a male voice said from underneath the heap, the owner shoving it aside to reveal a human guy that looked around his late teens. He was nicely tanned with messy golden blonde hair, cerulean blue eyes, and whisker-like markings on each cheek. Yawning deeply as he sat up, Naruto offered his bedmate a soft smile as he wrapped his arms around her and pulled her in close so he could rest his chin on her shoulder. Good morning Do-chan. Smiling back, the now-named Do gave the messy-haired blonde a quick kiss on the forehead as she nuzzled into his grasp. Morning to you too, Whiskers. So, why are we up again? Naruto asked tiredly with another yawn, making his fluffy companion roll her eyes in playful exasperation. Because, I've got interviews to conduct, not to mention that you still have refurbishing to finish before our grand opening on Monday. She told him as she tried to get up only for the young man to pull back down and lay back down, spooning up against her with a content sigh. Oh, why are you so worried about that stuff Do-chan? Naruto asked while gently nuzzling his cheek against Tiger Girl's, a knowing smirk spreading across his lips. The reason why soon revealed when a deep rumbling started to echo from Do's chest and her body started to relax again. My clones can cover all the employees we'll ever need and all that's left is a little tidying up with the flooring. So what's the harm in just 5 more minutes of snuggling? Well, when you put it like that. Rolling over so they were face to face, Do's purring grew louder as she smiled salaciously at the whiskered blonde. Wah! Thud and promptly shoved him right off the side of the bed. It's time to get up, lazy bones, she finished, pulling the covers off fully to expose her toned legs, a long tail that lazily swayed in the air, and frilly emerald green panties which left nothing to the imagination. Standing up with a stretch, the deadly kitty girl sighed in relief as her back realigned with a satisfying pop before looking over her shoulder to see Naruto already up and staring at her backside. Enjoying the view? Absolutely, he admitted without even an ounce of hesitation, making Do shake her head with a giggle as her cheeks gained a light blush. Well, enjoy it while you can because this view is off to take a shower, the tiger stated while heading towards the bathroom, making sure to put an extra sway of her hips along the way. As she was stepping through the doorway though, Do stopped suddenly and looked over her shoulder with a very deep purr. Of course, I could always use an extra hand, you know how cats are with water. Faster than she could blink, Naruto was at the orange-furred yokai's side, scooping her up into his arms as he waltzed into the bathroom with her in tow. Your wish is my command. Later that day Naruto whistled happily as he and a dozen copies of himself were hard at work, some spreading mortar, others laying out the new tile, and the rest setting in the grout. Man, who knew that accidentally hurling myself into a new dimension would have worked out so well? Yep, this young man wasn't from the dimension he currently resided in at all, having ended up here due to a mishap on his part. Originally he'd been from a world where everything revolved around ninjas and the usage of an inner power called chakra, which could be wielded and manipulated to achieve all sorts of inhuman feats. Case in point, the multitude of duplicates of himself who were currently helping him finish up the last bits of refurbishment on the restroom he was in. It had all started when he'd been duped by a former teacher of his named Mizuki into stealing the sacred scroll of seals. a relic that held many of his home's most dangerous forbidden jutsu, under the guise of a makeup exam. Of course, he hadn't known that part at the time and eagerly accepted a chance to fix his recent failure at passing the academy. Long story short, he succeeded in getting the scroll, learned how to use the powerful shadow clone jutsu from it, and even foiled Mizuki's scheme, which earned him a bona fide graduation. In his arrogance at easily learning one forbidden jutsu though, the blonde had secretly kept a copy he'd scribbled down for something called the Flying Thunder God. From what he had read, it was supposed to work by letting a person move from where there to wherever a special marker is placed, allowing someone to cross any distance in the blink of an eye. However, it wasn't as easy as copy and paste, as when Naruto tried to use it for the first time to move from one side of his living room to another, the blonde had instead found himself hurled into a formless void of some kind. Then some really scantily dressed little girl showed up, told him he was too noisy, and literally flicked him through a portal that caused him to crash right into the middle of downtown Kyoto. Oh man, I can still remember everyone's faces when they saw me walk out of that crater like I hadn't just fell 1,000 feet out of the air. Naruto thought with a chuckle, memories of that day flashing through his mind as he and a clone lined up the last 2 tiles. Once it was in place, the original got up and moved out of the way, allowing his clones to finish up the rest while he continued down memory lane. Naturally, he had been detained by the authorities soon after that, and before long he'd found himself before the leader of Kyoto, a woman named Yusaka, who by some cosmic irony happened to be a 9-tailed fox of this world. This was because he personally was what was known as a Jinjuriku, a human with one of 9 creatures made of pure chakra called a biju sealed within them, with his being the strongest of the lot, the Kyubi no Kitsune or 9-tailed demon fox. After much explanations, and a few misunderstandings to clear up, Yusaka had been kind enough to grant Naruto sanctuary, even having paperwork such as birth certification and residency. She'd also helped him understand how this new world worked, like how the human populace was largely unaware of the more supernatural elements and how many other factions from various religions and mythos ruled different territories, like angels, devils, demigods, etc. Everything past that was left for him to handle, but Naruto was nothing but resourceful and eventually managed to find himself work and a place to live. It had been over 5 years since then, and to be honest, he couldn't have been any happier if he tried with his new life. He had a great home, a wonderful community that respected him, an amazing girlfriend he loved more than anything, and even developed a knack for cooking. And it was thanks to this culinary skill set that Do and him were just a few more days away from finally opening their very own restaurant, a passion project they'd both put a lot of time and effort into. After double-checking the handiwork of his clones, the whiskered teen moved on to check out the rest of the building, just to be sure there wasn't anything that he'd overlooked. At the same time, he couldn't help but admire the fruits of his and his love's labor. The kitchen was large and spacious, with plenty of room for several people to work at once without issue. Meanwhile, the service area was designed with a mixture of classy and homely, using mostly traditional architecture that had giving a warm, welcoming atmosphere that would let patrons relax as they enjoyed their meals. And lastly, there was the bar, which was left nice and simple but still having a wide area of drinks displayed that'd give even the best clubs in the country a run for their money. Just a few more days, just a few more, he muttered while patting a support beam, already picturing what it'd be like once this place was filled with customers enjoying his cooking. However, his attention was soon drawn to a large clock on the wall, his eyes widening when he saw the time. Oh wow, it's past 9 already. I should get headed home before Do-chan gets worried again. With that goal in mind, the blonde dispelled his clones, after making sure they were actually done of course, before locking up the place. Stepping outside, he found that the weather had taken a turn, with the once clear skies replaced by a thick blanket of clouds that let loose a modest drizzle onto the city below. Then, with a jaunty whistle, Naruto began making his way down the street at a casual walk, not minding the rainy weather at all. Sure, he could just sprint and be home in less than 5 minutes if he wanted, but the time he'd spent here had given the teen a newfound respect for enjoying the moment. Plus, he actually liked the rain. He found it nice and soothing after long days. Naruto snapped out of his thoughts when, halfway through an alleyway he often cut through, the whiskered teen noticed a pair of people he didn't recognize huddled together on an old rusty bench. As he got closer, he saw they were both undisguised yokai women, kitsune to be exact, with soft golden and snow-white fur covering their bodies. One looked around his age and about a head shorter, with short ginger hair mostly covered by a cap, a petite frame that gave her a deceptively youthful appearance, and a big fluffy tail. Meanwhile, the other was older, around her mid-30s, early 40s, with long silverish gold hair that reached all the way down to her ass, a bust that was easily E-cup or larger, and an even bigger and fluffier tail. Based on their similarities, Naruto would hazard to guess the pair were related, mother and daughter most likely. However, what got Naruto's attention the most was how haggard the pair were, with the both of them thoroughly drenched despite the rain barely being a drizzle showing they'd been outside for quite some time. They also looked exhausted, with the younger girl's head drooping as she leaned against the back of the bench whilst her presumed mother kept looking around with bloodshot and baggy eyes. So focused on the ladies though, the whiskered blonde didn't notice a particularly large puddle in his path until his foot sank into it with a loud splash, causing the older kitsune's attention to snap to him instantly. Locking gazes, Naruto found himself unable to look away from the lady's deep blue eyes as he watched a wealth of emotions flash through them, none of them good. Despair, fear, regret, hopelessness, self-loathing, resignation, all the signs of a person who'd suffered, sunk to rock bottom, and was bracing themselves to do something desperate to get by. Sure enough, once she got over her own surprise, the foxy lady stood up and shyly made her way over to the whiskered teen, intentionally squeezing her chest between her arms so it stood out more.
Do you like my? Don't. Naruto cut her off as he held up a hand, making her stop mid-step with a startled look. If you're about to offer what I think you are, then just don't. It's pretty obvious you're not that kind of woman, ma'am.
That is, obviously caught flat-footed by the abrupt rejection, the kitsune lady stumbled over her words several times each time she tried to speak. Eventually though, she managed to recover her composure after taking a few deep breaths and gesturing to her large chest. Be that as it may, I know that young men enjoy these. If you could please give my daughter and I shelter from the rain tea, then I'll. Okay, I'm gonna stop you there. Naruto cut in again while grabbing the yokai by the shoulders, causing her to fall silent as he looked her in the eye once more. Do you really need a place to stay that badly? She nodded slowly. Alright then, I know somewhere you two can crash for a bit. Grab your daughter and let's go. Alright. Whether she was just too stunned to say anything else, or simply decided not to look a gift horse in the mouth, the golden vixen hurried back to her daughter's side. Gently shaking the girl awake, she murmured something to the younger kitsune while gesturing to Naruto when she looked up at her in confusion. Upon noticing his presence, revealing her heterochromia blue-hazel eyes, the girl immediately tense up before just as quickly schooling her expression with a stoic stare. Turning back to her mother, she whispered something which made the older fox woman frown a little before shaking her head and whisper back. This went on for about a minute before the girl finally got up and reluctantly walked up to the whiskered teen. Without further ado, Naruto began leading the pair along with a silent tension building in the air between the three of them as they trudged through the rainy streets. After a few blocks though, a thought occurred to the whiskered blonde as he glanced at the duo following him. Just realized I didn't get either of your names. Mine's Naruto, by the way. Naruto Uzumaki. Hana Inari, and my daughter is Rina. The now named Hana stated politely, giving a small polite bow as she spoke while Rina just remained silent. Nice names, Naruto said with a friendly smile which seemed to set the mother at ease, if just a little bit. Rina remained stoic as ever though, simply staring ahead blankly aside from the occasional glance sent his way. So if you don't mind me asking, why do you guys need a place to stay so bad? Did something happen to where you live? Flinching as soon the question passed his lips, Hana cupped her hands together and stared at the ground with a downtrodden look. You could say that, it was mostly my fault. I'd rather not talk about it.
Okay then. The blonde nodded in understanding, deciding not to pry further when he heard the way the kitsune's voice was starting to crack. Abusive husband, recently separated or divorced, kicked them out because she stood up for herself for once, probably tried something against their daughter she couldn't stand anymore. Now, while it wasn't hard to figure out these two came from a broken home, one might wonder how exactly Naruto knew all this about her.
Well, that'd be thanks to his ever-loving girlfriend who'd personally pounded into his thick skull all the various intricacies of body language to help him read customers better. Admittedly, he'd also picked up a few tricks from his therapist, someone Do had convinced him to start seeing after he'd told her about his childhood. And it certainly helped that Hana was not very good at hiding it. Her and Rina's clothes were still relatively clean with no changes on hand, meaning they hadn't been on the street for more than a day at most. When he'd asked about the reason why, Hana had cupped her hands, specifically covering her ring finger where he could still see the faint outline left around the base of the digit. The way she recoiled ever so slightly whenever he held up a hand for any reason, then instinctually moving more between him and Rina. Then there was how she immediately blamed herself, becoming meek and submissive when put on the spot before immediately clamming up about the specifics. All of these things gave him a very clear picture of what had happened, and boy, it was not a pretty one. Naruto was barely able to fight back the urge to scowl since it had no doubt scared the fragile woman and upset her already distrustful daughter. Thankfully, the sight of his apartment complex when they rounded a corner was enough to get his mind off these thoughts for the time being as he headed inside with the pair in tow. Leading them down the hall into an elevator at the back, Naruto hit the call button and waited for their ride to arrive, which thankfully only took a few seconds.
What followed was one awkwardly silent ride up to the top floor that was not helped at all by the bland music played over the speakers for the entire 7 stories.
As soon as they arrived, the whiskered blonde headed straight to the first room on the left marked 7B before looking back at Hannah and Rena. "Just a heads up, my girlfriend is the landlord of the building and can be a little possessive at times," he admitted with a sheepish smile, making both kitsunes blink in surprise. "So just let me do the talking and hopefully this won't end with me getting put in the doghouse for the next month." Not waiting for a response, Naruto pushed open the door and waltzed inside, leaving his guests no other choice but to follow after him, albeit reluctantly. "Hey Do-chan, I know you've probably had a long day, but I've got something I need," the young man started to say the moment he saw his favorite feisty feline on the couch in her favorite red dress, not wanting to wait and risk giving time for a misunderstanding to form before he got a word in edgewise. However, any and all thoughts about his current situation vanished when he saw that his girlfriend was not alone. Sat on the couch beside her was a short brunette bunny girl with her hair done up in a ponytail, long drooping ears that hung down to her waist, and light tan fur. She wore a simple yellow and white shirt that had been ripped open across the front and poorly tied back together along with matching shorts and a wide orange belt around her waist. To top it off, the poor girl's eyes were reddened, the fur beneath them drenched from tears, while she had an ice pack was taped to a bicep. Do had been right in the middle of wrapping some bandages around one of her ears when she heard Naruto coming in. "Naruto, thank God you're home. You will not belie," the tiger lady began, only to cut herself off as well when she saw the extras Naruto had brought along walk in behind him. "Is that Lop from Star Wars Visions in our living room? Who the hell are those women behind you?" they asked at the exact same time while pointing at their partners' respective guests, in shock and confusion, before recoiling in almost perfect sync. "I can explain."
So, who should go first? Naruto asked after a long awkward pause.
"Earlier that day. Not a bad turnout today," Do muttered to herself, her lips curling into a smile while walking down one of the less crowded streets of Kyoto. Her eyes flickered over the stack of resumes clasped in her hands as she slowly flipped through each one carefully. Each one was from the potential hires she interviewed today for her in Naruto's restaurant once it opened, specifically the ones she felt would fit best. Diane Foxington, former U.S. governor before her yokai status was accidentally exposed by exorcists of the church and forced to relocate, the striped feline thought while looking over the topmost file, which had the headshot of a smiling middle-aged kitsune with light peach fur wearing plain black glasses. "Good with PR, accounting, and management, would be perfect for working our publicity and keeping the books." Flipping to the next one, she was met by a picture of a wolf-like girl with white, black, and gray fur, hair and white eyes amidst blood-red sclera who had a "I'm done with this shit" look on her face. Luna Adagio, hellhound from the 7 Rings of Sin, arrested last year for destruction of property, accessory to murder, public indecency, and mishandling of hellish materials, granted early parole due to technicality of being a pet. Not exactly a ringing endorsement list, but hey, she dealt with worse. Experienced with handling liquor at least, plus Naruto's always been a sucker for a sob story, so he'll want to give her a chance. Switching to the next one, Do's good mood suddenly vanished upon seeing a teal-eyed lioness yokai with light tan fur. Nala Trotz, a longtime rival of Do's from back in her days back in culinary school, where they had been deadlocked over the position of top student all the way till graduation. Okay, and maybe she tried to get the attention of a certain ramen-loving goofball on more than one occasion. Still can't believe she actually had the audacity to show up for an interview, the tiger yokai thought with a scowl, quickly moving the file to the bottom of the pile. "She'd never let me hear the end of it if I hired her. Oh, so the great Do Shinzo actually needs my help after all, huh? As if I'd ever give her the satisfaction. Not in a million, oof."
Do was abruptly broken from her thoughts when someone slammed into her side, almost knocking her right off her feet. It was only thanks to her innate sense of balance that she managed to keep herself from falling on her ass as she stumbled back several steps. Quickly shaking off her surprise, she whirled around to give whoever it was that had ran into her a piece of her mind just in time to see the culprit disappear into an alleyway.
"Oh, you aren't getting away that easy, chump," she thought with a scowl before she gave chase, zooming across the distance as naught but an orange and red blur. Rounding the corner, her claws sprung out as her gaze scanned over the trash-filled backstreet before quickly locking onto the quivering form. However, as soon as she got one good look at her assailant, all the anger in Do's mind faded away just as quickly as it had come, replaced with a mixture of concern and confusion. "Isn't that one of the characters from that Star Wars show Naruto's always watching? Lop something?" Sure enough, leaning against an overflowing dumpster was Lop, or at the very least a rabbit yokai that looked almost identical to the titular TV character. However, while her likeness was surprising, the state she was in was much more important to the tigress at the moment. The front of her shirt had been ripped open, leaving her bare breasts exposed, and her shorts had been partly pulled down. Her body was trembling like crazy as she barely held herself up with one hand whilst the other clung to an fancy bladeless sword hilt. Eventually though, the poor girl just sank to her knees with tears pouring from her eyes as she sobbed her heart out. It didn't take a genius to figure out what had happened. "Hey," she called out, causing the lop lookalike to freeze up as her head snapped in her direction, eyes full of panic and fear. Before she could bolt again though, Do held her hands up peacefully while backing away a bit. "Easy there, it's okay, see? Not here to cause trouble." Her words did little to get the rabbit girl to relax, but at the very least she didn't immediately run away. Taking that as a good sign, the feline yokai took a slow cautious step closer, making sure to keep eye contact the whole time. When Lop didn't flinch away or anything, she took another step and then another, slowly inching forward while trying to keep a calm air around her. Once she was just a few feet away, she stopped again, this time to kneel so she was about eye level to the battered girl as she offered a hand. "Are you all right? Do you need help?" Do asked softly with the best comforting smile she could manage. This time she got a reaction when the brunette bunny seemed to finally snap out of her frozen stupor, blinking several times as if confused before her attention refocused on the yokai in front of her. Several emotions flickered through her eyes: fear, anxiety, distrust, confusion, hope, so many going by so fast that Do couldn't hope to keep up. HNF. Not that it mattered much as Lop suddenly tackled Do, wrapping her arms around the kitty cook. XXXXX. Inside a simple and traditional-looking room, Lop was sitting respectively across from an elderly man who held out an ornate sword hilt. "I respectfully accept," the bunny girl said as let him place the hilt in her hands, slowly holding it closer with reverence and crickle whoosh *. A bright red light suddenly engulfed everything, making Lop yelp in surprise before shielding her eyes until the unexpected light show stopped. Once it did though, the brunette's shock only grew as she opened her eyes back up and found herself sitting in an unknown dimly lit room. The only source of light was from a ring of scented candles, which barely gave her enough light to see that she was in a bedroom, if the bed in the corner was to go by. The floor was covered in a complicated ritualistic drawing drawn in what looked and smelled suspiciously like blood that culminated in a large 5-point star she was situated right in the middle of, alongside a plastic case labeled Star Wars Visions. "What in the world? Where am?" she started to ask, only to freeze when a horrific feeling ran through her, a sense of twistedness that suddenly flushed over her like a tidal wave. He, it worked. I can't believe it really worked," an unknown voice cried out from the darkness with a perverse giggle, followed by a soft click as the room was lit up. "What the fuck?" Lop screamed internally when the owner of the voice was revealed to be a completely naked middle-aged man, his lips twisted in an excited grin and his cheeks flushed red, who was literally drooling while staring at her. He was very pale and short and on the gangly side with short black hair, while his chest had a large tattoo of a cream-furred bunny girl in a super slutty outfit and the words, "Bun Bun for Life," printed in bold letters. Yet that was nothing compared to the room itself, which was filled to the absolute brim with various figures, posters, dolls, and plushies, all of them being sexy posed bunny girls. There were even pictures of her up there somehow. Oh god, what is this place? Where did he get these? Who even is he? Lop wanted so badly to ask these questions, to demand answers, but she just couldn't seem to get her voice to work. Sadly, she was so caught up in her shock that she didn't notice that the man was rushing at her until he was right on top of her. Grabbing her arm before she could react, the nude man roughly shoved Lop onto her back, smacking her head against the floor and making her drop the sword hilt. At the same time, that horrible twisting feeling grew 100 times stronger and clearer, causing bile to rise in the back of her throat as it finally hit her. They were his feelings, his twisted desires, his perverse intentions of what he was planning to do to her. "Hello Lop-chan, it's so nice to meet you in person," he moaned out salaciously, licking his lips as he sat on her legs before grabbing one of her ears and squeezing it, ignoring as the bunny girl cried out in pain. "Oh yes, your fur is just as soft as I've always imagined, it's so divine." Hey. Stop it. Get off of me you creepo. Snapping to her senses from the pain, Lop lashed out with her free hand, punching at the man's arm till he finally let her ear go. "Oh, but why would I do that? Our fun is only just beginning Lop-chan," the man said while grabbing her shirt and tearing it open until her breasts were exposed, completely ignoring as she kept wailing on him as hard as she could. He then reached down for her shorts, slipping his hand up the inside of the inner thigh before slowly pulling them down. "Now how about you be a good lil bunny and breed with me, heh?" "No. Stop it. Stop it," Lop screamed out, writhing furiously as she clenched her legs together as firmly as she could. However, This did little to deter the naked stranger, in fact it seemed to only make him happier as he moaned louder while feeling her up. "Oh so soft, so beautiful, I'm gonna enjoy this so." I said stop it. Wah, crash, or at least he was before he was suddenly flung off the bunny girl and across the room by an invisible force, slamming him into a figurine-laden desk hard enough to shatter it. Not wasting a second, Lop scrambled to her feet as quickly as she could, grabbed the discarded hilt, and bolted for the doorway. XXXXX Do blinked as she found herself back in the alleyway with Lop clinging to her as sobs racked through her body. The vision, no memory, she just saw faded to the back of her mind, but she could still remember every part of it in perfect clarity. "Oh you poor girl, let's get you somewhere safe," she murmured softly while gently scooping the crying brunette up in her arms and letting her rest her head in the crook of her neck. The tigress didn't mind the tears staining her fur as she made her way to her apartment building. "Man, how the hell am I gonna explain this to Naruto?" Present, and that's pretty much all that happened, Do stated with a sigh, gently petting Lop's head as the now asleep rabbit girl's head rested on her lap. "After I brought her here I did my best to help her calm down so I could patch her up." There was a long silence once she finished as Naruto just stared at his girlfriend with wide eyes and his jaw hanging all the way down to the floor. Meanwhile, Hana and Rina were absent, having been taken to one of the empty apartments that wasn't being rented out at the time once Naruto had explained his side of the story. Once the shock finally wore off, the whiskered teen's face contorted in a convoluted mixture of anger and pity. "Wow, that was fucked up on so many levels. Please tell me you called the cops or something on that asshole." "Of course, I told Tang what happened as soon as I got Lop to calm down," Do explained with a nod. She's circulating a sketch of the guy around to see if she can get any hits.
Well, I hope she does. I mean, bringing a girl to life like that just so he could force himself on her. So fucked up, Naruto muttered in disgust, cracking his knuckles as he imagined what he'd do to the man responsible if he got his hands on him. "Oh, it is so much worse than that," his favorite feline stated to the blonde's confusion. "When I described the runes on the floor to Tang, she said that they sounded just like ones for a summoning ritual. Her best guess is he used it in a copy of the series to literally kidnap her from another universe where she existed." "And I repeat again. Fucked up," the whiskered teen reaffirmed with a scowl as he got up from his seat and headed in for the kitchenette. Rummaging around, he brought out 2 margarita glasses along with several other ingredients before grabbing a bottle of tequila and a can of carbonated juice. "You want hard or soft?" "Diamond," Do stated, getting Naruto to nod as he put both options away and instead pulled out a small crystal bottle from the freezer. Dumping a good amount of it into a blender along with all the other ingredients, he blended it all together until everything was a nice smooth mixture. Then, after salting the glasses, he poured their drinks and headed back, leaving a clone to clean up after him. Handing Do one, the blonde downed a little over half of his in a single go as he flopped down into a recliner. "Man, this is not how I expected this day to go." "No kidding," the orange and black feline muttered while taking a more subdued sip as she kept petting Lop's head. "So what do we do now?" Naruto asked after a long pause, making Do sigh tiredly. "I don't know, love, I honestly don't know," the tiger girl muttered as she took another sip, savoring the feeling of the potent liquor flowing into her and soothing her frayed nerves. "This is just so much take in all at once." That's an understatement. Finishing off the rest of his drink, Naruto tossed the now empty glass to his clone to be washed while he sank into his chair. His head rose back up a few moments later and he sent his girlfriend a confused look though when a thought suddenly hit him. "Wait, why did you bring Lop here instead of the hospital or something?" "Because she's just developed as an empath. It's honestly the only reason she trusted me enough to let me help her," Do explained before giving her boyfriend a dry look. "And do you really think it had been a good idea to bring her to a place literally filled with miserable and scared people?" "She's an empath?" the whiskered blonde repeated with a raised brow. That never came up in her episode. "Yeah, well, I'm assuming getting kidnapped by a demented rabbit girl obsessed psycho didn't either." "Touché." Sighing again as she drained the last few drops from her glass, Do all but hucked the now empty cup at her boyfriend's doppelganger before massaging her temple as she checked the time. "Maybe we should talk about this in the morning, it's gotten pretty late." "Works for me," Naruto said before hopping back up to his feet. Walking up to the duo on the couch, he gently lifted Lop off Do's lap, taking extra care not to wake the slumbering rabbit as he cradled her in his arms. Then, without another word, the blonde made his way to the bedroom with his girlfriend in tow. The tiger girl lifted the blankets aside so Naruto could set Lop down, although that proved a tad more difficult than expected as the otherworldly rabbit had been surprisingly clingy in her sleep. Once they did manage to pry her free and place her onto the bed, Do tucked her in before laying down beside her, almost immediately getting snagged up into a cuddle. Meanwhile, Naruto went over to the closet, fished out a spare blanket and pillow, and then headed right back for the living room.
Man, haven't had to sleep on the couch since I accidentally spilled Szechuan sauce all over Doe's favorite shirt, he thought with a chuckle as he laid down, resting his head on the armrest. Now if it was only that.
Knock knock knock. Ah hell, now what? The blonde grumbled as he got right back up and went to answer the door. Upon opening it, he was greeted to the sight of a familiar silver blonde kitsune standing in the hallway, only now all dried off and in pajamas Doe had lent her. Oh Hannah, hey, did you need something? I didn't forget to bring over blankets, did I?
No, nothing like that, twiddling her thumbs together. Hannah kept her head bowed as she nervously fidgeted in place. I just wanted to say thank you, you've been so kind and helpful and if there's anything I could do to repay you I'll gladly do it. Well that's swell to hear but don't worry about it, I'm always happy to help someone in need. Naruto said with a smile while patting the busty kitsune on the shoulder. But, no buts Missy, the whiskered teen cut her off before they were both enveloped in a puff of smoke out of the blue. When it cleared Hannah was surprised to find that they were now standing just outside 6C, the apartment Naruto was letting her and her daughter stay in. Popping the door open, he gently coaxed the foxy lady inside as he gave her a serious look. Now go get some sleep already, you look like you're gonna keel over any second.
Not waiting for her to respond, Naruto closed the door between them before yawning deeply as he vanished in another swirl of smoke.
End chapter AN. Characters used were Doe from Deves, Hannah and Rina Inari from Love at First Tale, Lop of Star Wars Visions. Omake flashback. Love-struck Naruto double-checked the address on the small notecard he brought from his apartment. This would be where he starts his journey as a chef, having spent a couple years using shadow clones to give him plenty of experience from the cooks that worked for Yasaka. Sure, it cost him a few favors to the beautiful Kyuubi, but it was worth it. The final favor would be to name a signature dish after her and or her daughter, Kuno. Someone who Naruto absolutely adored. In his mind, she was the little sister he always wanted. Entering the restaurant, cooking school, Naruto politely greeted passing staff that welcomed him into the establishment, one of them kindly pointing him toward the kitchen when he informed them he was the new hire. What was obvious to him, thanks to living in Kyoto for the past few years, was that each of the employees were yokai. Most were in a human guise, but a couple refused to hide their natural features. Spotting the head chef relaying orders to his fellow cooks, Naruto waited for the man to finish before clearing his throat to get his attention. Turning to him was a Sarigami, who was in human disguise. Ah, the newest young star, he mused with a challenging look. You here for prestige, or you here to work? To work, sir, Naruto replied respectfully. This was something Yasaka drilled into him during his time learning in her home, comparing his manners to that of an orc. Rude, but not false. Good, I'll have you working with Doe. She's on meat prep. Doe, I got you some help. Turning from her workstation was a tiger yokai that, upon looking at her, made Naruto's heart skip a beat and his breath catch in his throat. She was beautiful, but there was a coolness to her that reminded him of those more confident older kunoichi he knew, like Kurenai and Anko. Approaching him, she gave him a quick once-over before sighing. A human, huh, not many of your kind like working under yokai, even here in Kyoto. Yokai, human, or whatever, we're all people, Naruto replied earnestly, giving an almost shy smile to her. Even her voice was beautiful, having an accent that was like honey to his ears. So you say. Well, it's not like I care if you have a problem or not. You're here, so let's get to work. You ever process meat of the silver skin and sinew? Not personally. I've watched others do it, though. Better than nothing. Come on, then, she said, gesturing for him to follow with her head. The day's lessons on meat preparation were far more interesting to the Uzumaki, and it wasn't just because of the gorgeous senpai who was teaching him. No buts Missy, the whiskered teen cut her off before they were both enveloped in a puff of smoke out of the blue. When it cleared, Hannah was surprised to find that they were now standing just outside 6C, the apartment Naruto was letting her and her daughter stay in. Popping the door open, he gently coaxed the foxy lady inside as he gave her a serious look. Now go get some sleep already, you look like you're gonna keel over any second. Not waiting for her to respond, Naruto closed the door between them before yawning deeply as he vanished in another swirl of smoke. And now, go home. With the three of us together, we can rebuild this family. What is family? Naruto's eyes flickered open as that familiar dialogue echoed in his ears, rousing the whiskered teen from his slumber. Slowly lifting his head, he blinked a few times when he found himself on the couch with the TV playing Star Wars Visions. Watching the climactic battle between the adoptive siblings Lop and Ocho going down, one could almost see the question marks floating around the half-awake blonde's head. The hell? Who turned that on? He certainly didn't, and he doubted it had been Do, since she'd always been more a Trekkie than a Padawan like him. Although his memories from last night flushed through his mind, Naruto wouldn't be surprised if his beloved wanted to get a better grasp on their new ward's situation.
Before he could mull on these thoughts for long, the blonde was broken out of his thoughts when he felt something soft and fluffy rubbing against his calves. Figuring it was Do getting comfy, he raised his head to tell her good morning.
Only to be left befuddled once again when he saw Lop instead. Seated at the other end of the couch, the brunette bunny was huddled under his blanket with his legs laid across her lap as she stared at the TV intently. She was also cleaned up, her fur glistening a little from residual moisture still clinging on, and he could smell the soft herbal scent of Do's shampoo wafting off of her. It didn't take Lop long to notice the blonde getting up though, and once she did, she quickly grabbed the remote to pause the show. "Sorry, I didn't mean to wake you up." "Huh? Oh, no, it's no problem. I'm usually up by now anyway," Naruto muttered with a shake of his head after checking the time, a little surprised to find that it was almost 10:30 already. Do normally never let him sleep in longer than 8 unless it was a day off or she'd been feeling extra frisky the night before. However, he quickly shook such thoughts off while turning back to the otherworldly rabbit and cocking a brow. "I'm just a little surprised that, I didn't think you'd how long have you been up?" "A couple of hours," Do said. "I should stay in bed a bit longer, but I just couldn't sleep," Lop admitted, fiddling with the remote. "And I got curious about this Star Wars thing everyone kept bringing up about me, so I figured I'd check it out. Took a while to find the right one." Glancing at the frozen scene of her beloved bot left broken on the ground still on screen, a shiver ran down her back. Kind of regretting it now though. Yeah, the blonde didn't know what else to say besides that. It's not like he knew what it was like to find out he was just an animated character whose whole life story can be seen all over the world by anyone after all. Seeing the negativity starting to well up in her eyes though, he knew he needed to think of something comforting and fast. How are you doing?" Almost as soon as that question left his lips, Naruto wanted to smack himself. "How are you doing? Seriously, brain? That was the best you could come up with?" "I honestly have no idea." The blonde was broken from his internal debate when the Leppy actually answered him. Shivering again as she rubbed her bandaged arm, she sank a little further under the blanket before playing the episode again. A sigh escaped her lips as her eyes flickered over the screen to keep track of her counterpart and adoptive sister fighting it out. "I don't feel freaked out anymore, I guess, but that's only because I just feel numb, unsure, still half believing that you're gonna wake up any second and find out this was all a very weird dream," Naruto offered when Lop struggled to find the right words, causing the TV bunny to nod in agreement. "Yeah, that's it exactly," and she had started to say only to trail off for some reason as her gaze drifted back to the blonde. Worried that he'd upset her somehow, he was just about to say something to apologize when she spoke again. "This happened to you too?"
"I'm so Caught off guard by the abrupt question, Naruto stumbled over his words as his brain took a minute to understand what she said. Sort of, I guess. Wait, how did you know that?" "I don't really know. When you talked it was like I could actually feel your sympathy and understanding," Lop explained as she scratched her chin unsurely. "I could just sort of tell that you knew exactly what I was trying to say better than I did. It's really weird to be honest."
"I see, right. I forgot that Do-chan said she was an empath," Naruto sighed as he rubbed his eyes, feeling dumb at letting an important detail like that slip his mind already.
"If you don't mind me asking, what happened to you?" his couch mate asked curiously, getting the blonde to sigh again and push off the blanket as he finally sat up. Stretching his arms over his head, he grunted softly when his joints all popped at once before standing up and heading for the kitchen.
"Well, to put bluntly, I was an idiot," he stated as he fished out a tin of coffee grounds and scooped some into the machine while filling up the pitcher with water. "I messed around with something I shouldn't have when I was a kid that ended up blowing up in my face and right out of my own dimension. Been stranded here ever since." "Oh, I'm sorry, your family must be really worried about you," Lop muttered sympathetically as she bundled up further under the blankets. "Didn't have one to be worried." Naruto decided to keep that part to himself, not wanting to make the bunny girl feel bad about unintentionally bringing up that little tidbit of his past life. She already had more than enough on her plate as it was, and he'd moved past that years ago anyway. Speaking of plates though, the blonde started getting out various cooking utensils and pans, neatly setting them up on the counter. Once that was done, he moved on to the fridge and grabbed a couple of eggs along with a few other odds and ends. "Are you alright with omelets, Lop?" "Sure," Lop said while nodding her head as she went back to watching her show again, only to find the credits rolling already. Seeing this, she tapped a little metal strip stuck to the side of her head, causing a pink holographic lens to appear over her left eye, before flicking through different options.
Meanwhile, Naruto got to work on breakfast by cracking, separating, whipping, and seasoning the eggs with practiced ease. He then set the mixture aside and moved on to prepping the stove, setting the temp to medium as he dropped a small dollop of butter onto a pan, twirling it around till it was completely melted.
Before long the air was filled with the lovely scent of fresh cooking, which caused Lop to perk up from her bundling on the couch and sniff the air curiously. As the smell flooded into the otherworldly bunny's nostrils, the tension in her body slowly started to ebb away and she sank back into her spot with a content sigh. As Doe always says, nothing lifts up one's spirits than a fresh homemade meal. The whiskered blonde thought, his lips curling upwards upon seeing this in the corner of his eyes. However, it quickly fell in favor of a puzzled frown when he glanced at the bedroom and didn't see his lovely girlfriend emerge like she always did when he started cooking, which confirmed his suspicion that she wasn't home. But that still begged the question, where is Do-chan? She went out shortly after I woke up, but she left this for you. Lop stated, getting the blonde to glance at the brunette bunny to see that she was holding up a small slip of paper. Before he could go over and get it from her though, the note slowly lifted from her hand all by itself and wobbly drifted across the room until it was right in front of him. Wow, you already got the hang of force telekinesis. Amazing, but how? He muttered with an impressed look as he grabbed the paper out of the air while Lop sighed and let her arm drop back down to her side. I've been practicing with the remote since I saw all them doing it on the TV, the overworldly brunette explained with a shrug before her ears drooped as she sighed tiredly. And I wouldn't say I've got the hang of it, that was a lot harder than it looks. Still impressive for just a few hours of practice. Naruto stated with a supportive smile that caused Lop to perk up as her lips curled up a little. The blonde then unfolded the note he had been given whilst mincing up some ham and peppers with his free hand. Naruto going to check on how those two strays you brought in last night are doing, be back soon. Love Do, should have figured that was the case, he thought, chuckling to himself as he tucked the note into his pocket and focused back on his work. Gathering up the fillings and sprinkling them into the pan, Naruto made sure to add extra pork and less veggies in Lop's omelet before folding them. That was because Leppy, her species, were mostly carnivorous despite their iconic rabbit-like appearance, at least according to the official lore. And based on the drool starting to dribble from the corner of her mouth the moment the smell of frying ham wafted her way, it was safe to say that was the case for her too. A few more minutes later and he was done with two perfectly made omelets steaming away as he slid them onto plates. After creating a clone to clean up, the blonde scooped up a dish in each hand as made his way back to the couch, handing one to the otherworldly rabbit before taking a seat on the far side of the couch, wanting to give her some space. Find anything you want to watch yet? Not yet, translators running slow. Lop stated, tapping the side of her face just under the digital lens as she spoke, making Naruto nod in understanding. While their spoken languages were fortunately basically the same by some miracle, he wasn't surprised that the written versions were different. He had had a similar issue, although not as bad as he just had to adjust to a few slightly altered versions of kanji, although he was also fluent in English, French, and semi-decent with Spanish thanks to Doe's sister Lajiao. He'd have to ask Doe about seeing if she could have her come over to help the girl out too later. You mind if I pick something then? Naruto asked with his hand held out, getting Lop to nod as she tossed the remote over to him. Then, while the whiskered team started flicking through various channels, she grabbed her fork and scooped out a small chunk of egg, cheddar, and pork. Raising it up to her lips, the rabbit girl gave it a few curious sniffs before taking a tentative bite. The instant the food made contact with her tongue, her eyes lit up and a soft moan escaped her lips as the flavor washed over her taste buds. Oh, my God! This is the best thing I've ever tasted, her stomach roaring for more. Lop scooped up almost a third of it at once and shoveled it into her mouth. The carnivorous bunny's cheeks were bloated out comically as she slowly chewed, savoring the taste for as long as she could. Aw man, I haven't had something this great since Father and Ocho first took me in. Swallowing, her good mood faded away as memories flashed through her mind, of her adoptive father giving her the first family meal she'd had in years. It hadn't been anything fancy, just a simple home-cooked meal of imported roast pork, but the euphoria of being freed from slavery alongside having a new family had made it seem like the most delicious food ever. Now here she was, kidnapped from her home, almost turned into a slave again, a sex slave at that, ran away from her would-be enslaver, and was taken in by a kind young woman. I hadn't really thought about it, but it's almost like I'm repeating, and if that video is true then Ocho and father, but I'm here not, what if, and they, So caught up in her thoughts, Lop stabbed into her omelet with a bit more force than necessary, causing Naruto to look over in concern from the loud clink of metal against porcelain. That concern only grew when he saw her trembling hands, which rapidly spread to the rest of her body as tears welled up in her eyes. Lop, are you all right? He asked softly as he set his plate down and scooted a little closer when he didn't get a response. Gently grabbing her shoulder, he gave the brunette rabbit a little shake which seemed to snap her out of her stupor as she finally looked at him. Hey, are you okay?
Is something wrong with the food? I can oof.
That was as far as Naruto got before he found himself with a sobbing Leppy clinging to him, her arms wrapped tightly around him as she buried her face in his chest. Why does this keep happening to me? She asked between sobs. First my freedom, then my parents, now my home and family. So why'd I keep losing everything I love? Well, Naruto stumbled over his words as he tried to think of something to say, to do anything that could help soothe her sorrows. But what could he say? He was sorry. That things would get better. This was major emotional trauma on his hands, not some little heartbreak that could be fixed by repeating a few sweet nothings. But he couldn't just do nothing either. He'd been in her shoes before, alone, confused, wallowing in despair, desperately wanting answers and wondering why the world kept taking more and more from him. So, he did the only thing he could come up with, pushing down his uncertainty. Naruto wrapped his arms around the crying girl. One around her waist, pulling her deeper into a hug, and the other against the back of her head. He slowly stroked his fingers through her hair while gently rocking back and forth, humming a soft nameless tune under his breath. This went on for what felt like hours, in reality only a few minutes, with Lop's sobs eventually dying away into quiet whimpers. And it was to this scene that Do would find herself walking into once she got back. What happened? She mouthed with a concerned look, to which Naruto made a "one sec" motion with his hand.
The blonde was then briefly enveloped in a puff of smoke as he switched places with his clone in the kitchen. As soon as the switch happened, the blonde's hand shot down to catch Lop's plate, which had been wedged between them the whole time, squashing what had been left of her omelet against his stomach. Scraping off what he could back onto the dish, he tossed the ruined food into the trash while Do walked up to his side. So. Shock wore off and reality hit hard, he stated softly, barely speaking above a whisper, getting his feline lover to sigh with an understanding nod. How about Hannah and Rina? Are they doing all right? For the moment, but you weren't wrong about your suspicions. The mother's attitude all but screams battered spouse syndrome. Do's lips curled upwards in a tiny snarl as she started hugging Naruto from behind for comfort. And she reeks of dozens of old wounds. I called GU to come over tonight to check her over just in case. And Rina? The blonde asked after a few moments of tense silence, a part of him already dreading the answer he might get. I could smell some bruises on her too, but other than that she was untouched. Thank goodness. Sighing in relief, Naruto leaned his head back and gave Do a kiss right on the lips, which made the orangette purr contently. And thank you too, you really are the greatest girlfriend ever. And don't you forget it, love, the tiger yokai said as she nuzzled against the boy's whiskered cheek before playfully nibbling on one of his ears. Smirking as she saw Naruto's cheeks gain a soft red hue, Do was sorely tempted to keep going and see just how flustered she could make him. After all, if there was one thing she really loved doing, it was turning her normally endlessly confident beloved into a stuttering mess of hormones. But one quick look back at the still crying Leppy in the living room was enough to kill off any frisky urges she had. Instead, the striped kitty cat gave the blonde another smooch before nudging him towards the bathroom. You go get washed up while I see what I can do to fix that up, she said, jabbing her chin towards Lop and the clone as she spoke while shoving the original Naruto along. Checking the time along the way, the orangette's eyes widened before she started pushing even harder. And you might want to be quick about it too. You've got a meeting with our new potential bartender in about an hour. I do? Since when? The whiskered teen muttered in confusion, making Do smile sheepishly as she pulled out a file from somewhere and handed it to him. Since this morning when I set it up. Sorry love, I meant to tell you earlier but I got a little sidetracked with. Ah, gotcha. Well, an hour should be plenty of time for me to get ready. Waving off the apology, Naruto quickly thumbed through the folder he'd be given with an intrigued look. A hellhound from the rings? Don't see many of those topside. This ought to be fun. And with that the blonde disappeared into the bathroom, the sound of running water soon filling the air a few moments later. Meanwhile, Do took a deep breath and knock. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. A groan escaped the feisty feline's lips as someone knocked on the front door. Couldn't she get just 5 minutes without something new for her to deal with popping up? Hoping it was just something like the mailman delivering a package she'd forgotten about or something, she made her way over to hopefully get it over with quickly. Only to have those hopes quickly smashed to pieces when she was greeted to the sight of a certain peach-furred kitsune instead. Foxington-san? Standing just a few inches shorter than Do, Diane Foxington was dressed in a light gray suit with a matching tie and glasses. The foxy lady had bowed respectfully while clasping her hands together and offering a polite smile. Hello again, Ms. Shinzo, it's a pleasure to see you again. Oh, I'm in you too, Do said with slight bow back, before clearing her throat as she double-checked the time again. Although I have to say I'm a little surprised to see you so soon considering our meeting isn't supposed to be for another hour. Ah, yes,
I do apologize. I expected it'd take me longer to get here so I left early. Guess I'm still used to Law's shitty traffic. Diane muttered as she rubbed the back of her head with a sheepish chuckle, bowing again apologetically. I hope this isn't too much of an inconvenience. Well, the striped feline discreetly leaned her head back to look at Lop and the clone of Naruto on the couch. Upon meeting the copy's gaze, she was surprised when the blonde shook his head and mouthed at her to go for it. Sending him an uncertain look back as she gestured to the bunny girl in his arms with her eyes, he just waved it off before tossing her purse. I guess now is fine. How about we talk over some coffee? There's a nice little cafe just around the corner. That sounds like a wonderful idea. Diane nodded with a smile as she stepped to the side so Do could go past her so she could lead the way.
As she stepped out though, Do stopped to send Lop one last concerned look over her shoulder before closing the door behind her.
The instant it did, however, Clone Naruto created a second clone that went over to the kitchen and got back to work cleaning up. Meanwhile, the original doppelganger made a ram sign before he was enveloped in a large cloud of smoke, startling Lop out of her emotional stupor. Although that was nothing to when the smoke cleared and she found that the clone she'd been hugging now looked exactly like Do. Blinking in surprise and confusion, the otherworldly rabbit opened her mouth to say something, only to be abruptly cut off when the Do doppelganger pulled her back into a hug, resting her face right in her ample chest. The reason for this was soon revealed not a moment later when the real Naruto re-emerged from the bathroom, all washed up and in clean clothes. Fiddling with his collar a bit, the whiskered blonde smiled softly upon seeing Do comforting Lop on the couch. All right, I'm gonna go make sure everything's all set up for later just to be safe, he said as he made his way to the window. Call me if you need anything, okay?
Of course, now get going already ya big goof before you're late. Do said with wave of her hand, getting Naruto to roll his eyes as he slid the window open.
Fine, if that's how you want it, the blonde said in mock hurt, complete with an overdramatic grasp of his heart, before he vanished in a swirl of smoke and the window slid back shut by itself.
Once again the moment he was gone, Do was enveloped by smoke again to reveal the clone as he let Lop go and smiled apologetically to the confused girl. Sorry about that, boss needed to go to that meeting but he'd never just dump you off with a clone like me, not just for his benefit anyway.
Oh, I see, that certainly made sense from what she'd seen of the guy so far, and on the plus side, all those surprises had gotten her mind off her crippling depressive situation, for the moment at least. However, Lop could already feel that encompassing dread slowly creeping back to the forefront of her mind. Her hands began to tremble again as those negative thoughts washed over her like an icy tidal wave. Shaking her head in a vain effort to stave them off, the Leppy pulled the discarded remote into her hand and just clicked onto the first thing she saw on TV. Sonic X. Cool. Boss has been meaning to check that show out, the clone said with a grin, flicking a switch that caused his part of the couch to recline with a raised footrest before laying back with his hands behind his head. His cheeks ended up gaining a light red tint though when Lop snuggled up to his side, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her head on his chest as she sniffled a little. One of her ears laid across his collarbone with part of it tucked under his chin with the fur lightly ticking against his chin. Not wanting to be mean and push her off when she needed comfort, the blonde copy tried to subtly scooch to the side instead so as to put a little space between them. Unfortunately, he forgot to consider that the brunette bunny had him literally wrapped up in her grasp so she was just dragged along with him. In the end all clone Naruto ended up accomplishing was wedging himself against the armrest while Lop snuggled even closer on reflex, leaving him with very little wiggle room. Oh brother, this is gonna be a really long day. Meanwhile down at the cafe around the corner, which was ironically named Cafe Around the Corner, Do and Diane could be found seated opposite of each other as a waitress brought them their orders. The former received a small glass of green tea and some dango whilst the latter just got a plain espresso. Oh wow, this place makes a great cup of coffee, Diane said after taking a sip of her beverage, sinking further into her seat with a relaxed sigh as the caffeinated beverage flowed past her lips. Indeed, my boyfriend is particularly fond of their cappuccino, Do said with a nod while blowing on her tea to cool it before rapidly dipping her tongue into it, just like how an actual cat drinks. Slurping up about half the cup in just a few seconds, she set the glass aside and began nibbling on a stick of her syrup-covered dumplings. Shall we get to business then?
I thought you'd never ask, the kitsune stated, setting her cup down as she straightened up her posture and intertwined her fingers. Almost like a switch had been flipped, her entire demeanor went from calm and casual to completely serious. So, is it safe to assume this is a follow-up interview?
Oh yeah, I can definitely see the politician in her now. While seemingly unfazed by the sudden attitude change, those with a keen eye would have seen as Do's own posture became a tad more rigid. A thick tension grew in the air as both ladies silently sized each other up, their gazes locked and searching for any signs of deception. However, as quickly as it grew, the tense atmosphere shattered when the tigress's lips curled into a smile and she offered a hand. "Actually, Foxington-san, to be frank, I already decided to hire you, so I guess I should start with saying welcome aboard."
Oh, that knocked Diane right out of her seriousness as she blinked several times in surprise. Once she snapped back to her senses though, she quickly accepted the offered handshake with a bright smile. "Well, that is fantastic news. And don't get me wrong, I'm certainly glad to hear, but I must admit I'm a little surprised." "You shouldn't be," Doe stated, finishing off the last few bites on her syrupy dumplings before picking at her teeth with the stick.
Reaching into her purse with her free hand, she pulled out the former governor's file and set it down between them. "Your resume alone is quite impressive, your work ethic is nothing but commendable, and aside from that little debacle with the church, you've got a spotless record. It would be nothing short of utter foolishness on my part to pass on such a promising candidate. You should tell that to the last dozen places I've tried to apply to," Diane muttered under her breath bitterly as she crossed her arms under her chest. "Let me guess, got as far as former foreign politician before they told you to beat it?" the tigress asked, getting the kitsune to nod as an irritated snort escaped her lips. "Usually with them saying something along the lines of, having no need for some crooked US scumball ruining our business." Figured as much, Doe shook her head with an exasperated sigh, not the least surprised by Diane's unfortunate plight. It was a sadly not an unreasonable assumption that an on-the-run out-of-country politician was corrupt in some way which nobody was going to want to deal with. "Well, fortunately for you, I don't judge anything by the cover, including resumes. Speaking of which, one of the other reasons I asked to see you was if I could hear more about this incident with the church, if you didn't mind." "I had a feeling you would." Her mood souring even further at the topic, Diane swilled down the rest of her coffee as she muttered something foul under her breath. "Do you want the long or short version?" "Whichever you're most comfortable with," the tiger girl said with a "go on" gesture while idly offering her new hire a stick of dango, which she accepted. "Well, you see, I used to have a quid pro quo relationship with the church. I gave them increased public funding and in return they'd stay out of my and the local yokai community's business. I was even friends with one of the exorcists who came by from time to deal with church matters," Diane explained, getting Doe to nod in understanding, before the kitsune scowled and pulled up side of her suit, exposing a long and narrow scarred bald spot. Starting just a few inches shy of her belly button, it stretched along her waist to her hip and wrapping around her back. "So you could imagine my surprise when I asked them to deal with a group of stray devils and ended up getting stabbed by one of the exorcists they sent instead." "Youch. How the hell did you survive that?" Doe couldn't help but ask with a sympathetic hiss. That was no mere flesh wound, just a glance told her that it had to have at least hit one of her kidneys and possibly the liver. Rather than answering verbally, the foxy lady just lifted up the front of her suit even further, exposing the rest of her stomach. Before Doe could question why she did that, her eyes widened in when she saw an incredibly faint but distinct sphere of orange light start emanating around her belly button. "Oh, you're a spirit kitsune, that's nice to know." Spirit kitsunes, a subspecies of kitsune that were born with the unusual trait of having a solid crystalline magic core in their bodies called a kitsune star ball or spirit orb instead of the usual etheric one. They were a highly coveted item in old times due to allowing whoever held them to have full control of the kitsune they originated from or to simply suck their power away and add it to one's own magical reserves. This was because spirit kitsunes were once considered one of the most powerful subspecies of yokai, comparable to even a Satan-class devil or Seraph-class angel. So having one at your command or successfully stealing their power used to be considered a great way to boost one's strength. Once, and used to be, being the operative phrases there, since having their strongest members constantly hunted down meant that typically only the weakest of their kind were left to carry the species on. Thus the fox-based yokai gradually lost more and more of their might with each passing generation until they had been reduced to a withered husk of their former selves. Where they had once been able to match off against some of the toughest of the tough, now one was lucky if they could hold their own against a lowly Tier 9 foe. And with their former glory faded into nothing more than old fables, so too did people's desire to hunt them down, given that it was simply not worth the effort anymore. Now that didn't mean they were entirely defenseless, as what they lacked in offense they made up with sheer difficulty to actually kill. They had an incredible natural healing factor so that most wounds would do little more than hinder one briefly. Generally, only light-based magic or enchanted weaponry, like the holy sword of an exorcist, could cause lasting or permanent harm to a spirit kitsune. Otherwise, the only surefire way of putting one down was by destroying their core, which also happened to be the physical embodiment of their life force. Not such an easy task either though, since being pure magic made them immune to most forms of physical attack and were often kept safely tucked away inside the owner's body like Diane apparently. However, Do was nothing if not observant as she noted how the sphere was flickering every few moments and how part of the foxy woman's scar overlapped with it. Only reason I'm not dead right now, the foxy woman stated, pulling her clothes back into place and took a bite from her snack, unintentionally chomping right through the stick. Not that she seemed to care as she just kept chewing, eventually spitting the broken stick out in even smaller pieces after she swallowed the dessert. Supposedly it was an accident and the exorcist responsible had, quote, misunderstood the mission briefing, unquote. I'm sensing but, coming up. Do added rhetorically, getting Diane to nod her head with an irritated grunt. But, considering how sure that bitch was sure me dying was part of the job, I suspect that the church decided they'd be better off without me around. And so that's why you moved here, because you didn't want to risk another accident, the tigress asked, using air quotes when she said the word accident. Hell no, if all it took was a few death threats to run me off I'd have been out of office years ago, the former governor stated, palming her fist with a firm confident glare, only to quickly deflate into her seat as she stared at her hands. Losing the ability to stay hidden amongst humans, however, much bigger issue. As she spoke, Diane's hands were briefly enveloped by an incredibly hazy image of what Do assumed was supposed to be normal human ones. She had to assume, given that, aside from being almost entire see-through, the projections were completely misshapen and constantly spritzing out before fading away completely as the kitsune cupped her side with a hiss. I see what you mean. Well, that confirmed Do's suspicions that Diane's side hadn't been the only thing scarred by the stabbing. And it made a lot more sense why she had to flee all the way to Kyoto. In this world an exposed yokai was as good as dead outside of their territory. I guess that means they got what they wanted in the end, huh? Yep, the kitsune muttered as she scowled, before her lips curled into a vindictive smirk as she pulled out her cell phone. But not before I got in one last laugh. Fiddling with the cellular device, Diane flipped it over for Do to see a video of a news report playing. The sound was off so she couldn't hear anything the stereotypical handsome reporter was saying, but luckily there was plenty of scrolling text to fill in the blanks. Beloved governor mysteriously retires, foul play by the church? Then, in the midst of the clip, the man gestured to the empty space beside his head as a picture popped up. Said picture looked to have been taken from a surveillance camera and showed a young woman, Diane, in a human disguise based on their matching suits and build. Well, and the fact the picture was showing the woman getting impaled in the stomach by an exorcist wielding a big-ass sword. Wow, was all the feline yokai could say as she watched the clip continue, the footage switching show another reporter standing in front of very large and very pissed mob holding protest signs. Many included pictures of Diane's former human disguise along with various scrawled messages such as, "Avenge her," and, "Where's our governor?" Oh yeah. Had some of my remaining contacts leak that little beauty shot of me to the press anonymously about 2 weeks after I got the hell out of Dodge. Just long enough for them to give some half-assed cover story that I had gone into spontaneous early retirement to save their own hides, Diane admitted with a snicker, her grin growing even wider even as she turned her phone off and put it away. Definitely poked a few holes in that plan to say the least. I'd like to see those bastards try to sweep their mess under the rug now. Damn, if that is how you handle a grudge, then remind me never to get on your bad side. A comically sized sweat drop rolled down the side of the Do's head as she unconsciously eased a few inches back from her new employee. You know what they say, you don't fuck with a politician, especially not one as well liked and connected as I was. The peach-furred fox stated in a matter-of-fact tone as she went to take a sip of her coffee, only to find that her cup was already empty. Waving down a waitress to order another, she was pleasantly surprised when it was delivered in just a few seconds. Now that's service. So, was that all you needed to talk to me about? Pretty much, but if you don't mind getting to work right away. Trailing off while reaching into her purse once more, Do pulled out a stack of papers which she laid out across the table one by one. Each one held various designs for various types of posters, ads, flyers, signs, and other such things needed to endorse a company to the public. I could use a second opinion on the promotional materials we'll be using for the restaurant once we open. Oh, well, in that case, at Naruto and Do's restaurant. Naruto was humming a happy tune under his breath as he stood behind the bar counter, casually sorting through the vast array of liquors that had been stocked up. Yo ho ho and a bottle of rum, he sang while picking up an actual bottle of rum in one hand and bottle of vodka in the other before tossing them both in the air. Pulling out a pair of glasses from under the counter, the blonde dropped several ice cubes into both before catching the liquors and popping their lids off with his thumbs so he could pour. Once both cups were filled, he set the bottles back in their rightful places, recapped of course, and grabbed the rum for himself. The glass of vodka on the other hand was given a gently flick, causing it to slide down the counter till it came to a stop right in front of young goth lady that had just stepped through the door. Obviously caught off guard by this, the newcomer stared at the beverage and then Naruto for a few moments with a raised brow before shrugging it off as she grabbed the offered drink. Chugging the whole thing down as she made her way over to the whiskered blonde, she slammed the empty glass onto the counter whilst taking a seat. Blonde hair and whiskers, you're that Naruto guy I'm supposed to be talking to?
That'd be me, which would make you Luna, nice to meet ya. The whiskered blonde said with a friendly smile, to which the gothic girl just rolled her eyes with a scoff.
Yeah, salutations and all that crap. Luna muttered with a sarcastic wave, obviously not in the mood for idle chit-chat. However, her mood did perk up a little bit when he refilled her glass. As she downed the fresh glass of booze, Naruto took the moment to get a better look at her. The best way to describe her was stereotypical goth with pale skin, messy gray hair that was shaved bald on the side, deep red eyes, and plain punk clothes that were intentionally tattered in design. Not a bad disguise you have there, although I don't see why you're bothering to use it around these parts, seeing as it sticks out way more than your natural look. HMPH, force of habit I guess, she said with an uncaring shrug once she finished her drink before her body was enveloped by a brief flash of light. When it faded away, Luna's appearance was revealed to have completely changed to reveal her true appearance, that of a hellhound. The canine girl's mouth had extended into a short snout, her legs had extended to a digitigrade structure as her now bare feet tapped against the ground, and lastly her eye color had inverted to silver with red sclera. Her whole body was covered in a mix of white, gray, and black fur, while a long tail nearly half as long as she was tall slowly swayed from her backside and a pair of pointed ears twitched atop her head. Overall, she could easily be mistaken for some type of werewolf or a furry cosplayer, although Naruto had a feeling she would not like him pointing out that last bit out loud, so wisely kept his mouth shut. Now that's more like it, you look better this way. Don't bother with that sweet talk bullshit, flattery ain't getting you shit from me, the hellhound stated dryly while giving the blonde a touch me and you're dead look. If you think you can get in my pants with some free drinks and a few cheap-ass compliments, then politely go fuck yourself. I'm only here for the job, nothing more, nothing less. Rather than being intimidated or upset though, Naruto chuckled deeply while downing the last of his rum and putting the cup aside for washing. Not afraid to speak your mind even to your future boss, that's certainly a refreshing change after all the ass kissing from the last few candidates I've dealt with. Whatever you say pal, Luna muttered sarcastically with an eye roll before sitting up a bit straighter as she crossed her arms. You gonna keep talking about my looks or? Whatever else the hellhound had been planning to say was left a mystery as she cut off mid-sentence when the whiskered teen disappeared beneath the counter. A second later he re-emerged with a tray laden with the various things ranging from tequila to salt to a drink shaker. Well, if you're gonna be a bartender, he stated after setting the tray down on the counter. Then, in a puff of smoke, Luna suddenly found herself standing in Naruto's place while he sat in her seat. Then I need to see how well you can follow the 4 S's of bartending by making me a margarita. What the? Stumbling slightly from the unexpected switch, it took a moment for the wolf girl's brain to catch up with what was happening. Once it did though, her brow furrowed as she gave the young man an annoyed glare even as she got to work. How the hell did you do that? Trade secret, was all he said with a cheeky smirk which just made Luna roll her eyes again as she poured tequila and triple sec into the shaker. Fine, so what are the 4 S's anyway? Speed, skill, style, and socializing, otherwise called the 4 S's. Holding up 4 fingers, Naruto's grin grew as he started to tick them off one by one. They're the most important things any decent bartender needs to follow to succeed. Okay, the first 2 make sense, make them fast and make them good, but the fuck does style and socializing have to do with making drinks? Luna asked with a raised brow while furiously shaking the cocktail mixer.
Isn't it obvious? If you make making drinks look good, it tends to draw more customers in to buy them, and if they like you then it'll make it more likely they'll tip well, the whiskered blonde explained. For example, you were in prison for a year, right? What'd you do to end up there? Got involved with a bunch of dumbasses and their stupid problems. Scowling as she spoke, the hellhound's claws dug into the metal of the shaker before she slammed it onto the counter.
Oh, how so? Once more unfazed by the outburst, Naruto intertwined his fingers together and rested his chin atop them as leaned onto the counter with a curious tilt of his head. You're gonna keep nagging me about this, aren't you? Salting the glass, Luna sighed in annoyance and exasperation when all she got in response was another smirk from the whisker-faced teen. Fine, about a year ago my adoptive father, Blitzo, had the genius idea to start his own business in hell called the Immediate Murder Professionals, or IMP as he called it. Long story short, damn souls would pay him and he'd come up to settle any unfinished grudges they had, permanently. That makes sense, probably no shortage of assholes down there with a bone to pick and no qualms about paying for murder. Naruto could see the logic behind such a company. It certainly had the potential to make a lot of easy money if done right anyway. And he couldn't fault Luna for working at such a job since, from what he understood about the Seven Rings, there wasn't many other work opportunities she'd have access to down there. So then you guys got caught on the job or something? If only it was that fucking simple. Turned out Blitzo and his little stooges were running around up here undisguised every fucking time they took a job, so naturally they started getting attention we didn't need. Scoffing, the silver-haired demon dog emptied the shaker into the glass before abruptly swiping a hand over a lime, slicing it into several thin slivers with her claws. Grabbing one, she slipped it onto the rim of the cup before setting the finished drink down in front of Naruto, who helped himself to it with a curious hum. And as the secretary I had no idea until he got caught up in some grudge match with his ex-girlfriend over a parking space, which led to some retarded, who can S and dick measuring contest. Long story short, things got out of hand real fucking fast, and before I knew it, we were all detained by some group calling themselves DHORKs. Oh man, the DHORKs got involved? That had to be embarrassing, Naruto muttered with a sympathetic wince as he idly sipped at his drink. DHORK, short for Department of Hellish and Occult Regulation Keepers, a special group of law enforcement that worked to ensure the continued peace of supernatural communities across the world. Not aligned with any of the major factions, they were the go-to group for dealing with any magical or mystical mischief makers causing trouble. Or at least that is how they tried to market themselves as, whereas in reality they were the magical world's equivalent of Petty Crime Division. They were tasked with dealing with any and all supernatural problems that basically nobody else really felt was worth their time handling. From bank-robbing shapeshifters to college mages doing prank summons, basically anything that was considered too low-level was promptly shoved onto DHORKs. Which in turn meant that to actually be arrested by them for any reason was considered a mark of shame and infamy that basically nobody wanted to admit to.
You could say that again, Luna muttered, grabbing the bottle of tequila she used and taking a big swig from it.
Not much to say after that, was tried, convicted, and thrown into the slammer until I got let back out thanks to a technicality 2 months ago. Can't go back to hell though because of this fucking thing keeping me here till my parole is over. Grabbing the hem of her shirt, she lifted it up a little to show a faintly glowing brand of a cross seared into her side. Not that it matters since I don't even have a place to go back to since nobody's paid the rent for over a year. Yeah, that'd definitely be an issue. The whiskered blonde could relate with that problem since he technically had the same issue considering that if he got back to his dimension somehow he'd be homeless. Focusing back on the present, he downed the last few sips of his margarita before setting the glass back onto the tray. Well, on the positive side I'd say you've gotten yourself a job. That margarita was not bad at all, easily a 5 out of 10. Normally this would be the point that the potential hire would cheer up or show relief upon hearing that they'd made the cut. However, Luna was anything but ordinary as instead her gaze narrowed into an offended glare. Only a 5? You used a touch too much salt and triple sec which threw off the flavor, plus you forgot to wash your claws before slicing the lime. And your presentation was stiff, which'll discourage customers, Naruto stated before tapping the cocktail shaker, specifically the dents left in the side by her claws. I also had to dock a point for damaging the equipment, that's a pretty big no-no. HMPH, sure, sounds fair, she conceded sarcastically, before pushing the serving tray towards him as she cocked a brow with a challenging look. So why don't you show me what a perfect 10 looks like, Mr. Critic? Oh, well if you insist. Switching places with her again, Naruto quickly placed everything back on the tray which he promptly tucked away back under the counter. When he came back up, the whiskered blonde held 6 new shakers and 6 different colored little decorative umbrellas, 3 in each hand, and wearing a blindfold. Then prepared to see a master at work. With a flick of his wrists, he sent all 6 umbrellas up in the air while simultaneously popping the lids off the mixers and setting them on the counter. Naruto then grabbed a fresh bottle of tequila from the rack and spun the cap off with his pointer finger before flipping the bottle in the air, catching it sideways with the spout pointing outward in the crook of his elbow. Folding his arms together, the blonde then tilted them sideways while making an alternating waving motion. This caused the bottle to both roll down to his other elbow and dip up and down, pouring just the right amount into each of the shakers without spilling a drop. After all 6 had their fill, he jerked his elbow, launching the bottle into the air again and back into its proper spot on the rack before the blonde recapped it and repeated the process with a bottle of triple sec. Next Naruto reached under the counter and pulled out 6 tiny different colored little bottles and poured them into one mixer apiece. This was soon followed up by a modest amount of crushed ice from a scoop, flicking the lids back on after each one was filled. The blonde then proceeded to grab all the cocktail shakers, tossed them up into the air, and starting to literally juggle them with just one hand. Every time he caught one, he'd give a few quick but firm shakes before tossing them back in the air. Meanwhile, his free hand was busy prepping glasses with salt and lime slices that he laid out in a circle on an empty tray. And finally, after tossing all the shakers up a little higher than normal,
Naruto caught one in each hand and poured them into a cup after popping the lids off with his thumbs. He did this twice more with the remaining 4, stacking the empty tin canisters together once he was done with them.
This left him with a tray of 6 lovely margaritas that were colored yellow, orange, red, purple, blue, and green respectively. "How's that for 10 out of 10, my friend?" the whiskered blonde asked with a grin as he pushed the tray over to Luna, just in time for a matching umbrella to gently land in each glass. The hellhound didn't say anything at first as she simply stared at the assorted drinks laid out before her with wide eyes. By the time the surprise wore off for her, Naruto had already removed his blindfold and was silently enjoying the look on her face. "Fucking show off," she muttered eventually, grabbing the red glass and downing about half of it in one gulp. "Holy fuck, that is a good margarita. And I don't even like them." That was kind of the point. Disappearing in a puff of smoke, this time Naruto appeared in the empty seat beside Luna as he snagged the orange drink and held it up. But enough about that, how about a toast to new coworkers? Rolling her eyes again, albeit this time with a minuscule smile on her lips, the demonic canine half-heartedly tapped her glass against his. "Still not gonna fuck me if that's what you're hoping for." "Wasn't expecting to. Besides, I'm already in a committed relationship with an amazing girlfriend, who would also skin me alive if I so much as thought about cheating on her," the whiskered teen stated with a chuckle that proved contagious as a soft snort escaped his drinking companion's lips. "Sounds like a real keeper you've got there." "She sure is," sighing nostalgically as he took a sip from his drink. Naruto took a long sip from his beverage before continuing. "Speaking of which, I saw in your resume that you're still staying at a halfway house on the other side of Kyoto." "Yeah, so what if I am?" Luna asked defensively with a raised brow. "Well, as it just so happens my girlfriend owns an apartment building that's a lot closer and we've got a few vacancies," he stated. "If you want she can set you up with one so you won't have to walk so far to work every day. And I'm sure you'd appreciate having your own place again." "HMPH, that's an understatement," the hellhound muttered under her breath as she finished the rest of her drink and grabbed another one. Nursing this one more slowly, she gave the blonde beside her a piercing gaze, searching for any signs of deception or ulterior motive in his eyes. Not finding any, she chewed on the inside of her lip with a contemplative look before nodding. "Fine, but only if my roommate can come with me." "Oh, sure, as long as they don't cause any trouble I don't see why not," not what Naruto had been expecting but he could work with it. Grabbing a pen and notepad from his pocket, he jotted down an address and handed it to the wolf girl. "Come by there tomorrow and we'll get you all settled in. Work for you?" "Not like I got anything else planned, if you'll excuse me I've got shit to pack." Grabbing the remaining margaritas, Luna quickly chugged each one down before wiping her muzzle and standing up. She was engulfed by a familiar glow as she returned to her human disguise while heading for the exit. "Have fun with that," the blonde said with a wave which the hellhound ignored as the door slammed shut behind her. "Well, I'd say that went well." End chapter. Omake Kiss It Better Do sighed boredly as she cleaned up the last of the dishes used from the day's shift. Normally, she'd have some help, but she allowed her coworker to leave early because they were in a rush to catch the next transit home. She knew from experience the hells of commuting in Kyoto. A sudden yelp caught her by surprise and she jolted while her tail and ears stiffened. After a moment, her ear twitched and she caught the sound of a familiar voice groaning in a mixture of discomfort and disappointment. Curious about what Naruto could be up to, she left the kitchen and headed to where the smell of tequila emanated from, which was obviously the bar of the restaurant. There, she found Naruto dripping wet from booze while a variety of shakers were seen on both the bar top and the floor. With a knowing smirk, she leaned against one of the booth walls and asked, "Still trying to get the Ferris rainbow down?" "Yeah," he sighed out while grabbing a small rag to dry himself off. "I think you have a few kinks to work out, then," the tiger yokai teased. "Oh, haven't you heard?" He fired back with a sheepish smile, thoroughly embarrassed about how his crush had found him. "Dropping booze all over yourself is the new way of getting drunk." He laughed awkwardly at his, to him, lame joke, but was pleasantly surprised when Do simply blinked once before snorting in amusement and hiding a laugh behind her tail. Thankfully, she didn't see him stare at her in amazement with a blush, because this was the first time he had heard a real laugh from her. A snort or a chuckle on a rare occasion, but never a full laugh, and, like everything else about her, he loved it. While still trying to calm her laughter, Do walked over to him and grabbed another rag to help wipe off his face. "You're such a goofball, you know that?" "I am what I am, and not what I'm not," he replied in a fake philosophical tone, earning another snort from her. "Sure, you are," she fired back before, in a move totally unexpected to both of them, she leaned in and licked a running drop of tequila that started from his bangs and rolled down his whiskered cheek. Both were bright red at what she had done, frozen in place and unsure of how to react while their brains attempted synchronized system reboots. Do was the first to recover, and she dropped her rag before clearing her throat awkwardly. Be more careful next time, okay? She warned him in a soft voice before muttering a good night and rushing to grab her things. While Naruto was still trying to mentally recover with his face still blushing brightly, she headed for the door and called out, "See you tomorrow," before leaving in an embarrassed hurry. After some time, Naruto's mind had rebooted enough for him to whisper to himself, "Did she just?"
With Do, she groaned softly and rested her head against the window of a bus she was standing in, unable to get what she had done out of her mind. Way to go, Do, embarrassing yourself in front of the guy you might like, fuck.
Absently, she licked her lips and somehow tasted the lingering flavor of tequila on them, making her unconsciously smile to herself. Not like I got anything else planned, if you'll excuse me I've got shit to pack. Grabbing the remaining margaritas, Luna quickly chugged each one down before wiping her muzzle and standing up. She was engulfed by a familiar glow as she returned to her human disguise while heading for the exit. "Have fun with that," the blonde said with a wave which the hellhound ignored as the door slammed shut behind her. "Well, I'd say that went well." And now a bright light was seen, glaring brightly for several moments before moving away to reveal the thoughtful expression of a serpentine-like woman holding a penlight. She was very tall with a slender frame, bright pink and white scales covering her from head to foot, long black hair that stretched literally all the way to the floor, and wide eyes with slit pupils. As for attire, she wore a red dress much like Do's, albeit with the addition of a caduceus patch on the right side of her chest and a name tag, Gu Shinzo, on the left. A little nurse's cap sat atop her head, sitting just a little askew in a cute way, and large glasses took up nearly a third of her face. Currently she was standing in front of Lop in Naruto and Do's living room, the Leppy sitting on a stool while the light was shown in her eyes. After about a minute or so, the apparent doctor flicked the light off while reaching into a large black case sitting nearby, rifling around inside for a moment before pulling out a tongue depressor. "Okay sweetie, now can you open your mouth and say, 'Aw,' for me?"
Not saying a word, Lop just did as she was told, letting Gu press down her tongue with the little stick as she shined the light in her mouth. After that, the snake lady did all the usual stuff like checking the Leppy's pulse, listening to her breathing, etc.
Then she went on to examine her injuries, primarily the ones on her arm and ear, carefully feeling around the bruised areas while Lop did her best not to flinch too much. While this was going on, Do was on the couch, trying to look calm and relaxed as she patiently waited for the exam to be finished. Those that knew her well though could still see that she was quite concerned, mostly evident by the small yet sharp flicks of her tail. Alrighty, that should just about do it. Thankfully, it didn't take long for Gu to finish her examination, putting fresh bandages on Lop's wounds. Once she was done, the doctor gave Brunette Bunny a pat on the shoulder while offering her a bright orange lollipop which she politely accepted. "You should take it easy for a few days. Try not to lift too much with that arm either and you'll be good as new before you know it, got it?" "Yes ma'am," Lop mumbled with a respectful bow of her head, making Gu giggle as she ruffled the otherworldly rabbit's head. "None of that now. I'm too young to be called ma'am." "So, she's all right," Do cut in, still trying to sound casual even though both ladies could hear the obvious concern bleeding into her voice. "Aside from the few nasty bumps and bruises she's got, she's the picture of health." Guiding her patient up from her seat as she spoke, Gu gently nudged her along towards the couch where she promptly took a seat beside the orange feline. The snake doctor's lips curled up a little higher when she noticed how Do's tail immediately curled around Lop the moment the girl got close to her. However, she quickly schooled her expression to one of seriousness as grabbed her bag and started digging in it once more. "My concern is with this empathic sense you've told me about. Has it been causing any issues?" "A little bit, mostly when I'm trying to sleep." Lop nodded her head as she sank further into her seat, idly rubbing one of her eyes with a tired sigh. "I've tried tuning it out but I don't even know where to begin honestly." Yep, turned out being able to sense the feelings and desires of anyone who got near her made it hard to get a good night's sleep. Even now she was trying her best to not focus on the concern practically washing over her from the tigress beside her nor Gu's intense curiosity and desire to study her closer. Of course, that was nothing compared to what she had to withstand whenever Naruto and Do were together. The sheer intensity of love, adoration, and certainly no shortage of lust those two felt for each other was damn near overwhelming at times. "Don't feel bad about that, hun," Do told her with a supportive smile while patting the otherworldly rabbit's back. "Unlike what TV loves to show, most people don't know how to use new powers that are suddenly thrown onto them. That I can attest to. I can't even count the number of patients I've had to treat who believe junk like that." "I should have just the thing you need," Gu said with a shake of her head before frowning as she sunk her arm further and further into her medical bag. "That is if I can just find the blasted thing. Where the hell did I put it?" Lop blinked when she felt a sudden surge of annoyance from Do out of the blue, who palmed her face with an exasperated groan. God damn it, not this stupid skit again. Before the brunette Leppy could ask her what she meant by that, her attention was brought back to Gu as she pulled out an archaic cube covered in ominous red sigils. Nope. Tossing it back in the pack, she dug around again before pulling out a comically large needle filled with glowing green fluid, causing Lop to freeze. Nah. Thankfully, that also went back into the bag as Gu searched through her stuff yet again until she fished out a pill divider. Not that either. Come on, I know I had one of them somewhere, aha, there you are. With a victorious grin, the pink reptile pulled her arm free one last time to reveal, a necklace? It wasn't anything special, just a foggy white crystal dangling from her hand by a simple gray cord held together by a plain metal clasp. Giving it a once-over to make sure nothing was wrong with it, she smiled with an approving nod before tossing it to Lop, who caught it on reflex. Put that on. Raising a brow, the otherworldly rabbit looked at the unassuming piece of jewelry curiously before shrugging and putting it on like she was told. However, the moment she clasped the cord around her neck, she shivered as what felt like a cool breeze flushed over her while the crystal started to glow ever so softly. Whoa, talk about a, wait a minute, Lop blinked as the strange sensation wore off and she felt, nothing. More exactly, she couldn't feel anything from either Do or Gu. No feelings, no desires, nothing at all. Looking back down at the necklace, she unlatched it, causing the gem to stop glowing and the emotions of both other ladies in the room to flood back before quickly relatching it. Okay, that's cool, but how? Selenite on its own just a pretty little rock, but a little Yuki it becomes a nifty little trinket that shields the mind from outside influences, Gu explained as she packed up the rest of her stuff back up. It should help, at least until you can figure out how everything works anyway. It certainly will, thank you very much ma'am, the Leppy said, bowing her head respectfully while her doctor shook her head with an exasperated sigh. What did I just say about that ma'am stuff? The reptilian yokai scolded half-heartedly, giving a mock scoff of annoyance. However, she couldn't keep up the act for long as a smirk just would not stop spreading across her lips. In any case, I'm always happy to be of help when I can. Still, thank you for taking the time out of your day for my troubles. Oh, you are just so cute when you're being all polite like that. I can see why my sister's taken a liking to you so fast, Gu said, shooting Do a knowing look while gently pinching Lop's cheek as the otherworldly bunny mumbled something sheepishly under her breath. She quickly straightened back up though once she got a good look at a clock on the wall and headed for the front door. Speaking of the time though, I sadly must get going. I've got 2 other patients waiting to see me. Call me if anything else comes up though, alright? The last part was directed more towards Do than Lop, but both of them nodded regardless, making the pink ravenette's smile grow. Good. Well then, ta-ta for now, she said as she walked out of the apartment while waving goodbye to the duo, only to immediately pop her head back in a second later with a sheepish smile. Oh, almost forgot. Do you'll need to re-purify the necklace with Yuki every few weeks or the protective effects will wear off.
I know how mystical artifacts work sis, the tigress yokai stated dully. Mom made sure to pound that stuff into all our heads as kids.
Doesn't hurt to double check, you did tend to take a lot of catnaps during those lessons, Gu pointed out with a teasing smirk that made Do roll her eyes. Grabbing one of the throw pillows on the couch, the striped feline took aim and chucked it at the doctor's head, nailing her right in the face. Although all this really accomplished was making Gu's smile grow even larger. Just get out of here already. Alright, I'll be out of your fur, later, gals. With one last giggle, Gu ducked out of sight, leaving the cat and bunny pair alone in the apartment. Do watched the door closely in silence for about a minute before sighing deeply once she was sure her reptilian sibling was actually gone. I swear, every time, it's always with the jokes and skits. So, the cat chef was quickly brought out of her thoughts when her ward started to speak. She's your sister. Yes, she is, and before you ask, neither of us are adopted nor do we have different parents, Do stated, causing Lop to blink in surprise, while she pulled out her cell phone. Fiddling with it for a few seconds, she flipped the device around so the Leppy could see a pair of photos. You think that's confusing? Here's the rest of my sisters and my parents. Both pictures showed 14 yokai women and a man all huddled together for a group shot, including Do and Gu. Aside from those 2 there was a dog girl, a mouse girl, a goat girl, a bird girl, a monkey girl, a bunny girl, 2 ox girls, a pig girl, a horse girl, and another lizard girl. Almost all of them were wearing the exact same style of red dress with a little gold trim, the one exception being the bird lady who had a white dress instead due to her already bright red plumage. Then there was the last lady, a white A with a deep tan that looked to be the oldest and strangely most human of the women, having only a pair of ears and a tail to denote her status as a yokai, unlike the fully anthropomorphic appearance of the rest. Also, unlike the rest, she wore a primarily gold dress with red flowers emblazoned across the outfit. What was strangest of all, though, was how in one photo she was shown with little cat ears and a cattail along with black stripes across her body and in her hair, whilst in the other she was shown with large rabbit ears, a little cottontail, and devoid of said stripes. In both pictures, though, she is hugging the man, a rather average-looking human, and her husband if the rings on their fingers were to go by, as both smiled happily. Wow. How is that even possible? Long story short, our mother is a kotobuki. Do couldn't help but giggle at the lost look on Lop's face as the girl took in the pictures. Reaching over, she gently tapped the bottom of her jaw to close it before pointing to the tiger, rabbit woman in the pictures. She changes into a different species each year based on the 12 animals of the zodiac calendar. So, each year she had a child.
They'd also be a different species, the otherworldly rabbit finished with an understanding nod while unwrapping the sucker that she'd been given by Gu and popping it into her mouth, blech.
Only to immediately spit it back out with a disgusted expression.
Hopping up from the couch, Lop rushed over to the kitchenette sink and wasted no time washing her mouth out straight from the tap. All the while a dumbfounded Do watched this all go, idly plucking the lollipop off her cheek where it had landed and giving it a curious lick.
Guess she doesn't like carrot flavor. XXXXX. Down on the ground floor of the apartment building, Naruto could be found leaning against the wall just inside the entrance. The blonde had a bored look on his face as he played a running game on his phone, occasionally looking up to check the street through a window. Humming under his breath, a chuckle slipped past his lips when he beat the current level and the character started doing a silly victory dance. You'd think they'd come up with something better after him. Naruto snapped out of his thoughts when he heard someone coming up from behind and looked over his shoulder to see who it was. To his mild surprise, it was Rina, the kitsune looking stoic as ever as she tried to quietly make her way by him. As soon as she noticed that he was looking her way, though, she stopped with her gaze flickering between him and the exit. She was quick to school her expression back to normal before looking back at the floor, obviously trying to play it cool, but it was enough for Naruto to tell she still distrusted him. Not that he blamed her, they'd only known each other for a few days, and it wasn't exactly under pleasant circumstances. On the positive side, she was sucking on one of Gu's homemade lollipops, meaning she'd gotten checked over already by his girlfriend's sister. Hey Rina. Are you going out? The whisker-faced young man asked casually while pointedly stepping away from the doorway, suspecting that she believed he intended to stop her from leaving. A hunch that was swiftly proven correct when Rina subtly yet noticeably relaxed once the pathway was clear. I am, she stated softly, keeping her gaze on the floor with her arms crossed while she spoke. He didn't miss how she made sure he stayed in her peripherals, but she didn't seem threatened around him, just cautious. Seeing that she was obviously not in the mood to talk, Naruto simply nodded as she shuffled past him. However, once the foxy girl got to the door itself, he cleared his throat to get her attention while pointing to a half-full umbrella stand beside her. I suggest you take one. News says that it's supposed to rain again today. Thanks. Rina grabbed a smaller collapsible umbrella and stuffed it into the pocket of her jacket before she hurried out the door, shoving past a certain hellhound along the way. Hey, watch it bitch. Not in her human disguise, the snarl on Luna's snout was out for all to see as she glared at the kitsune's quickly retreating form with her lip curling back even further when she didn't even apologize. Once she was out of sight though, the demonic canine calmed down and kept going, grumbling under her breath about inconsiderate dumbasses along the way. However, she barely made it 3 more steps before stopping yet again, this time due to seeing Naruto leaning against the wall. Hey again, the whiskered blonde said cheerfully as he walked up to the hellhound with a wave. As he got closer, he noticed the small battered-looking duffel clutched in Luna's hand, which looked barely half full based on how deflated it looked. I was wondering when you'd finally show up. You decide to take the scenic route or something? Oh sure, took in the sights, got a few photos, all that typically dumbass tourist shit, the black and white furred canine muttered sarcastically before crossing her arms with a huff. Look, can we just skip the bullshit and get to the moving in part? It was a very fucking annoying walk here. Sure, but where's your roommate? Naruto asked with a raised brow. I thought you were gonna bring them with you. Alright. Grumbling under her breath, Luna leaned back so her head stuck out back out the still open door and shouted, Hey, get your ass in here already. This is the right place. Okay. Hold your horses, a seductive feminine voice called back in a mix of amusement and exasperation, which was soon followed by the sound of squeaking wheels grinding against cement. Assuming that that was the roommate bringing in a dolly or cart carrying their stuff, Naruto was quick to move to help them. However, the moment he peered the open doorway, the blonde was thrown for a loop when he was met by the very unexpected sight of Verosika made a, "Oh, I see my fame has preceded me," the newcomer said with a grin as she rolled into the premises with a smile on her lips. A demon like Luna, she had bright hot pink skin, long ombre white hair with pink undertones, a pair of crooked horns atop her head, a pair of tiny wings on her back, and a spade-tipped tail that slowly waved behind her. Of course, Naruto knew exactly who she was as soon as he saw her, having heard of the infamous pop star with a penchant for raunchy songs and debaucherous parties. She'd been rather popular in both the human and supernatural communities around the world, at least until she up and dropped off the radar about a year ago after one of her concerts was attacked by a giant fish or something. It was obvious that the woman had seen better days too, considering the deep bags under her eyes, the frazzled split ends of her hair, and stress wrinkles. Oh, and then there was the fact she was missing an arm on one side of her body and a leg on the other. Both limbs had been removed at the knee and upper bicep respectively at some point, leaving her with nothing but useless stumps poorly wrapped in old gauze bandages. Without a literal leg to stand on, she was stuck sitting in a beat-up wheelchair that had obviously seen better days as well, while a cardboard box full of her stuff sat on her lap. And yet despite all of this she still managed to keep a rather light-hearted and jovial smile on her face as she rolled up to the young man. "Whiskers, blonde hair, cute face. I take it you're the nice fellow giving us a place to stay?" the demoness asked rhetorically as she offered her good hand for a shake. "Huh? Oh yes, right. Naruto Uzumaki at your service." Snapping out of his surprise, Naruto accepted the handshake with a sheepish chuckle. "Sorry for staring. It's not every day that a star like yourself pops into my humble little abode."
"Don't worry about it, I'm used to it." Verosika shrugged off the apology as she giggled softly while Luna grumbled sourly under her breath about annoying dumbasses.
"Ah, so that's why she's in a bad mood," Naruto chuckled softly as the pieces clicked together in his head. Crossing town on foot with a celebrity in tow, even if just a minor one, would have no doubt been quite a hassle. Figuring he could cut the hellhound a break, the blonde cleared his throat before jabbing a thumb towards the hall. "Well, how about I cut to the chase and show you gals to your room? You both are probably eager to get settled in." "Yes, very much so," Luna stated gruffly, grabbing the handles of Verosika's chair, and wheeling her down the aforementioned hall before the pop star could say anything. Not that the crippled singer seemed to mind as she gave the hellhound an amused look. "Always gotta be a grump about something, don't you, Luna? Shut up or I'll dump you back at that shitty halfway house. But then who would you bitch to about your woes over a glass of Tito's? Stuff it up your ass. Maybe later," Verosika said coyly, making Luna roll her eyes, before the succubus singer jabbed a thumb over her shoulder. "By the way, you do realize that we need the stud back there to tell us which room we're staying in, right?" Coming to a stop halfway, the gothic canine slowly doubled back down the hallway until her dull-faced expression met Naruto's amused one. "Need some? Just show us to our fucking room already," she cut him off mid-quip, making the blonde and wheelchair-bound succubus laugh while the former led the two demons to the elevator. "At the moment I've got you gals set for a room on the 6th floor, but if either of you'd rather something on the lower floors instead, I can talk to Do-chan about seeing if we can work something out," Naruto told the pair after hitting the call button, his gaze settling mostly on Verosika. A fact said succubus did not miss if the bemused sigh that escaped her lips as she shook her head was to go by. "You don't have to dance around the subject. I'm a slut, not a bimbo," she stated, wiggling the stub of her lost arm for added emphasis. "And while I appreciate the offer, that won't be necessary. I can deal with a little height." "All right, if you say so, but the offer is on the table if you change your mind," the whiskered teen said with a nod as he let the matter drop, for the time being at least. He knew how proud demons could be, and no doubt hers already stung enough from her current state. No need for wounding it further with his charity. Admittedly, he was more than a little tempted to ask what exactly happened to the pop star that left her in such a poor state. He assumed it had something to do with what happened at her concert, from the giant squid thing or whatever. However, that still begged the question, why she wasn't just deported back to the rings. Everyone knew the DHORKS had enough trouble with their budget as it was, so keeping around a recently crippled succubus that they'd have to oversee all the medical expenses for just didn't seem like something they'd do. Not when they could have just dumped her back in hell and left it to some other schmuck to take care of her. "I'll ask her about it later," Naruto thought with a shrug as the elevator pinged to tell them it had arrived before the doors slowly opened. He wasn't so insensitive to just ask someone he just met. "Oh my god. What in the world happened to you, huh?" The whiskered blonde was swiftly brought out of his thoughts as he was pushed aside by a pink and white blur rushing out of the elevator. Quickly shaking off his surprise, he whirled around to find said blur, which turned out to be GU like he suspected, looking over Verosika frantically. Hi there. Can I help you with something?" the succubus asked with an awkward smile as the serpentine nurse got right up in her personal space.
Rather than answering her though, Gu grabbed onto the residuum of Verosika's arm and giving the messy bandages a very disapproving glare before quickly undoing them as she reached into her bag. Naturally, this freaked the demon amputee out more than a little and she immediately pulled her stub out of the weird woman's grasp.
When Gu quickly latched onto the limb again though, Luna growled lowly, baring her claws as her hackles rose. However, both demons stopped cold when the nurse pulled out fresh gauze and, in the span of just a few seconds, completely wrapped the stump. This has got to be some of the shoddiest work I've ever had the displeasure of laying my eyes on, the raven-haired serpent muttered bitterly under her breath as she moved down to the lust demon's missing leg after tossing the used wrappings into the trash. Gently poking at the loose gauze while her tongue flickered past her lips, her frown only grew as she swore under her breath. They didn't even bother to properly disinfect the wound site or ensure proper suturing at all. It's a miracle you haven't developed an infection yet. Well. It was a prison doctor, so yeah, what did you expect? Verosika asked rhetorically with a shrug, calming down a little once she saw that the yokai knew what she was doing. I figured as much. I know these kinds of wounds anywhere, bloody mantids. Shaking her head in disgust, Gu quickly finished wrapping the leg before grabbing the box of the succubus's stuff off her lap and shoving it into Naruto's arms. She then grabbed the wheelchair's handles, pulling them out of Luna's grasp as she spun the entire chair around and headed for the front door. Or at least she was before Verosika squeezed the brake, causing Gu to stumble as the wheelchair came to a complete stop. Excuse me, total stranger that I just met, but where the fuck do you think you are taking me? Huh? Oh, sorry, the serpentine yokai mumbled, first in confusion then embarrassment as her brain caught up with her actions. Scratching her cheek with a sheepish giggle, she walked around until she was in front of the succubus again and held out her hand. My apologies, I tend to get a little tunnel vision at times when it comes to my job. I'm Dr. Gu Shinzo, general surgeon, diagnostician, and primary care physician at your service. How fancy. Verosika Mayday. Sexy as fuck pop star at your service, Verosika said with a playfully salacious smile as she accepted the offered handshake. Now I ask again. Where the fuck were you trying to take me? To the hospital I work at, Gu stated bluntly, her gaze flickering to her fellow pink gal's arm and then her leg as her face scrunched up in disapproval. The condition of your injuries is nothing short of appalling and I simply cannot condone allowing such blatant medical malpractice to be left alone. So, if you'd please allow me to, I'll take you down to my office and we can get this situation rectified ASAP. Oh well, that certainly sounds like a swell idea. How much? Like a switch was flipped, Verosika went from sweet and playful to straight up deadpan while her smile dropped straight to a frown, causing the raven-haired yokai to blink in surprise. Pardon? The bill. How much do you plan to charge me for all this? The succubus demanded, crossing her one good arm across her chest, and tapping her foot against the ground expectantly. Alright, billing, that kind of slipped my mind. Gu coughed into her hand as her cheeks gained a light red blush at forgetting something so important. She couldn't go around dragging patients to the hospital to get treated for free. Not unless she really wanted to lose her job or get slapped with a lawsuit. Just add the costs to my tab, Naruto chipped in suddenly, causing Verosika and Gu's attention to snap to the whiskered blonde. I'm already paying you to treat all the other new tenants, Gu. We might as well add in these two while you're here. Fair enough, the serpentine doctor said with a nod, turning back to her would-be pink patient. Does that work for you? Humming thoughtfully, Verosika rubbed her chin as she mulled over the idea for a moment before shrugging. What the hell? As long as I'm not paying for it, then I'm in. Fantastic. Then let's get going. As she spoke, Gu grabbed the push handles once more and led the crippled succubus away. However, she quickly doubled back once more in order to offer Luna a business card. Feel free to give me a call later if you want and we can set up an appointment too, okay? Whatever, the hellhound said in a dull tone, obviously not caring one bit even as she plucked the card out of the ravenette's grasp and stuffed it into a random pocket. Whether she didn't notice the dismissiveness or was simply not bothered by it, Gu finally left for real with Verosika in tow. The crippled succubus gave her roommate and new landlord a playful wave goodbye before vanishing through the front door. Well, that was fucking stupid. Luna cut Naruto off, grabbing Naruto by the collar of his shirt and dragging him into the elevator. Whoa, feeling a bit eager, aren't we? The blonde asked jokingly while straightening up his shirt and tucking the box of Verosika's stuff under his arm, more amused than annoyed at the sudden manhandling. Although his good mood did falter slightly when the demonic canine slammed the 6th floor button hard enough to dent the entire panel. That would not be fun buffing out later. Fuck off, I've had to deal with non-stop bullshit for hours. Excuse me if I just want to get this crap over with already and have a drink, she muttered, tapping her foot against the floor impatiently as she glared at the digital counter slowly ticking up at each floor they passed. I'd say it's only 1 in the afternoon, but I'm guessing that's considered about the normal time to start drinking where you come from, Naruto said with a chuckle while Luna snorted and rolled her eyes, neither confirming nor denying his claim. You may want to hold off on the hard liquor though, you and I are going shopping after this. The blonde could almost swear he heard Luna's neck crack when her head jerked to the side, so her gaze was focused on him instead. The fuck you say? What, are you hard of hearing? I was pretty sure I was speaking quite clearly, the blonde said cheekily while taking the lead once more when the doors opened with a soft chime. Jokes aside, I said that we're going shopping after you get settled in, specifically for clothes. No offense, but you are in desperate need of some new threads.
Gritting her teeth, Luna stomped after Naruto with her fists trembling from the barely restrained urge to rip something to shreds. How I dress is none of your fucking business, ass. And how you dress isn't the problem, Naruto cut her off, a chuckle slipping past his lips at the dumbfounded look on her face before he continued. The problem is you obviously only have one outfit to wear and said outfit is practically ready to fall apart. Your shirt is barely being held together by shoelaces, zip ties, and a safety pin that's about 2 seconds from breaking for starters.
And as if on K, there was a soft snapping sound before the threads on Luna's shirt went slack and the whole thing started to slide down her torso. Her eyes went wide while Naruto quickly averted his gaze as her ample chest was exposed for all to see. Shit. The hellhound dropped her bag and reached behind her back with both hands to pull the cords taut again, covering her puppies back up. Fiddling around blindly for about a minute, she eventually managed to knot the threads together to keep them from slipping again. Once she was done, Luna brought her hands back around to reveal a little safety pin that was missing its needle clutch between her claws. Scowling, she flicked it aside before getting right up in Naruto's face with a murderous glare. You saw nothing. Normally this would have been the point where someone crapped their pants out of sheer terror or at the very least cowered a little. And yet Naruto didn't even so much as flinch as the furious hellhound towered over him threateningly. He just kept standing there with that same small smile on his lips, before his hand shot up and right in front of Luna's snout in the blink of an eye. Then, faster than her brain could even register what was happening, he gave the demon dog's nose a sharp flick that made her recoil with a yelp.
Ow, the fuck, just because I don't mind your attitude doesn't mean that I will tolerate getting threatened for something out of my control, Naruto stated while fishing out a set of keys from his pocket. He ignored the glare Luna was giving him yet again while cupping her snout in favor of slotting one of the keys into a door marked 6F. Swinging the door open to reveal an empty plain apartment, he set Verosika's stuff down just inside before stepping aside and tossing the keyring to Luna. Welcome to your new home, take some time to. This time it was Naruto's turn to be cut off as Luna stomped by and slammed the door shut behind her. Okay, I'll be back in an hour to take you shopping. I never said I was going. The hellhound shouted back, making Naruto roll his eyes with a sigh. Are you really turning down free new clothes? Fuck you. Pass. I have a girlfriend already, see you in an hour. Grr. End chapter. Omake flashback. Beat the meat. Naruto grunted as he slammed a meat tenderizer into the side of a slice of beef, sinking the studded hammer deep into the flesh. Pulling it back out with a grunt, he raised his arm high to give it another whack. Ah, hold it right there, mister. However, before he could bring the hammer down again, a slender orange and black fur-clad hand clasped around his wrist. Looking over his shoulder, the whiskered blonde was not surprised to find Do standing behind him, shaking her head in disapproval. What's wrong, Do? Did I forget something? Yeah, I told you to tenderize that filet mignon, not pulverize it. As she spoke, the tigress slipped in closer, standing directly behind the young man as she lined her hands up with his. Moving their free hands to the edge of the expensive cut of beef, she had Naruto hold it firmly in place before they raised the hammer together. You can't just wail on it wildly like that or the meat will fall apart when you cook it. Try a bit softer. Okay, so like this? Naruto asked as he brought the tenderizer down again, not quite as hard as the first whack but still enough to make a muffled thump ring out as the table shook a little. Better, but you're still using too much force, Do said, tightening her grip a little as she moved the blonde's arms for him. Resting her chin on his shoulder so she could see better, she puppeted his arms as she had him pound against the steak with strong but swift strikes. That's more like it. You want to pound it just hard enough to loosen up the muscle so those tasty juices can really seep in deep. I see, Naruto stuttered out, trying to focus on his work and not the wonderful feeling of Do's silky soft fur brushing against his skin nor the soft tickle of her breath on his neck. He had a job to do. He needed to pay attention, he had to. The blonde's breath hitched when he felt Do's tail curling around his waist before slowly weaving downwards to coil against his inner thigh. A blush erupted across Naruto's cheeks as he bit his lip,
doing his absolute damnedest not to react. There we go, all done. Thankfully, he didn't have to suffer for long as the steak was soon fully tenderized and Do let him go, moving to his side instead as she held up their handiwork. And that is how you tenderize a steak properly. You got all that, Naru?
I will never forget, was all the blonde said with a nod, while internally he was thanking every god he could think of.
Great, now get that puppy all seasoned up and ready for the skillet, chop chop. The tigress stated with a snap of her fingers, to which Naruto saluted with a quick, yes ma'am, before rushing off. And now, a few days later, alright everyone, we're opening in 20 minutes and boss wants everything triple checked. Naruto, or rather a clone of him, called out as he paced through the main floor of the restaurant alongside a half-dozen other clones. Each of them was dressed in red and black waiter outfits with matching hats that covered their golden locks and cloth masks to cover their whisker marks, thus leaving them all looking nondescript. And to top it off was the logo for the restaurant itself, a chibi fox and chibi tiger curled together atop a cinnamon roll-shaped cloud, which was sewn onto the backs. All of them were rushing around the front of house, scouring the entire place from top to bottom for anything that may have been missed. Meanwhile, another clone in a slightly different uniform, being more black than red, was over at the bar alongside Luna doing one last scrub down. Well, more so he was doing the scrubbing while the hellhound, who hadn't bothered to put on her human disguise, boredly tapped her claws against the counter and poured herself a glass of vodka. Speaking of the demonic canine, Luna was dressed up in some new clothes of her own thanks to Naruto dragging her off to shop the other day. Her shirt was mostly the same as her old one, a shoulder-less gray belly shirt that had straps set in a reverse pentagram.
The only real difference was the addition of a couple silver eyelets where the straps interlocked, or at least what could be seen past the unbuttoned studded red leather jacket she wore over it. Along with this new coat she had a pair of short black denim shorts that were torn, stylishly, at the bottom with a blood-red belt holding them around her waist and studded black thigh-high open-toe stockings. All in all, she was a stark contrast to the formal appearance of the clones, yet none of them seemed to mind one bit. Give me that. Her drinking, however, was another issue. It would seem as the bartender clone swiped the cup out of her hand before she could take a single sip while giving a disapproving shake of his head. However, all this did was make Luna growl as she stomped right up in the masked doppelganger's face. "The fuck's your problem, prick?" she demanded, jabbing a claw at Barclone's chin. "You said I could help myself to have a drink." "Yes, from the regular stock, not the top-shelf liquors," the duplicate stated as he grabbed the bottle that Luna had served herself from, a rather fancy bottle that had a bejeweled dragon wrapped around the neck with the mouth acting as the cap. Glancing at the missing amount, he shook his head with a sigh while placing it behind a glass case and handing the cup off to another clone that ran it to the back. Once he was done, Bar Clone grabbed a bottle of a regular brand of vodka and poured some into the new glass before sliding it across the counter to the hellhound. "I'll let it slide this time, but try that again and boss will be docking the loss out of your pay." "Oh whatever, so I'll be out a couple bucks, big fucking whoop," Luna said while rolling her eyes, flopping into a seat as she downed half her drink in one swig. "I'm so ska. The cheapest liquor in that case is 3,000 a shot." Red, the demonic canine's voice cracked a little and she almost dropped her drink when the masked duplicate informed her of the cost. 3,000. For one shot. Considering the size of her glass, which was a lot bigger than a shot, that was, well, a lot of fucking money. "I'll take your shocked silence as a understood boss, won't happen again," the clone said with a nod before going back to scrubbing the counter down once more. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, 15 minutes till opening. "Now are you two absolutely sure you're up for this?" the real Naruto asked in concern as he stood before the two most recently hired employees of his and Do's restaurant, Lop and Hannah. The ladies were currently adorned in waitress outfits which bore the restaurant's logo as they sat before the blonde, who was dressed in a stereotypical chef outfit. "Yes sir, I'm ready to go." Lop seemed quite eager to get started, smiling confidently as she sat up attentively with her arms crossed over her lap. On the other hand though, Hannah was much more subdued as she just stared at floor submissively while nervously fidgeting every few seconds. "I'm happy to be of use." Despite their positive responses, the frown on Naruto's lips remained, if anything growing deeper, particularly at the kitsune's wording. Truth be told, he hadn't exactly been keen on hiring either of them when they'd asked because it made him feel as though he was taking advantage of their situations for his own gain. It had only thanks to Do's insistence that he'd caved, having whittled him down with a mixture of cold hard facts and those accursedly adorably pouty faces she could pull at the drop of a hat. Speaking of the devil, a familiar pair of arms gently wrapped around the whiskered teen's waist from behind as his girlfriend, also in chef clothes, rested her chin on his shoulder. "Relax love, they're just gonna be waiting tables, it's not that bad."
I really don't think this is the best time to throw them out there. We're not even open yet and we already have 400 people lined up and dozens of reservations, the blonde muttered with a shake of his head while pulling himself out of the tigress's grasp, gesturing to a monitor that showed security feed of the front of the restaurant. And sure enough, there were dozens, possible hundreds, of people lined up outside the front door with another masked clone checking each of their reservation. Things are going to get completely crazy out there the moment we open the doors and if fortune favors us as we hope, then we'll be packed like this every night if not more, so we might as well let them wet their feet now. Doe cut in, placing a finger against her lover's lips to silence him while she spoke. When she finally removed it though, she stopped him from trying to talk again with a swift kiss on the lips and gently stroking his whiskered cheek. Everything will be alright love, you just gotta relax and go with the flow. Alright. Sighing, Naruto just couldn't stop himself from smiling as he kissed Doe back before chuckling softly. Even after I've graduated, you're still reminding me of the basics. That's why you keep me around, isn't it? The feline yokai asked coyly with a seductive purr, dragging a claw up his chest until she flicked his chin. Doe then spun around and sashayed away to another part of the kitchen, smirking as she could feel Naruto's gaze on her ass. About halfway across she stopped just to look back and send the blonde a playful wink. I'm gonna get the stoves prepped, I'll let you know if I need any help.
Goddamn, I love that woman, Naruto stated as he sighed once again, slumping a little with a goofy grin on his lips and little hearts practically floating around his head. Fortunately, the sound of Lop clearing her throat was enough to snap the whiskered young man out of his love stupor, and he turned his attention back to her and Hannah. Oh right, sorry, well if both of you are sure you're ready then head over to the staging area and wait for the orders to be ready to go out.
You got it, sir. Lop gave a salute, quickly jumping to her feet and marching off to do what she was told whilst Hannah just nodded her head as she followed at a more sedate pace. The latter had only made it a few steps though before she was stopped by a hand on the shoulder. Jumping a little at the touch, her head snapped back towards Naruto in alarm, worried that she'd done something wrong, only to find him offering a soft smile. Don't be afraid to stop and take a break if you begin feeling overwhelmed, Hannah, he told her while subtly gesturing to a door off to the side marked, break room. Employees only. Waiting tables can be a lot more taxing than people think, especially when you're just starting out, so make sure to pace yourself. I don't want you trying to push yourself too much out there when you don't need to, okay? Averting her gaze, the kitsune stumbled over her words for a moment before slowly nodding her head while fiddling with her hands nervously. I understand, sir.
Great, and just call me Naruto, I'm not a fan of that sir nonsense. Naruto said before letting Hannah continue on her way, his smile growing a little when he saw the small but noticeable upward quirk of the fox lady's lips. Sadly though, his good mood was cut short when a clone ran up to him and whispered something into his ear while holding up a glass of booze. Seriously? She got into the dragon heart? He asked with a deadpan, his frown deepening when his duplicate just nodded in response. Swiping the glass from them, he took a small sip of the liquor before sighing in exasperation. Fantastic. Go report to Diane so she can mark up the loss, then make sure it doesn't happen again. Hi boss. The clone gave a salute and ran off, leaving the original to himself as he polished off the rest of the vodka. Just because he couldn't sell it didn't mean he'd let such high-quality stock go to waste after all, and it wasn't like one drink would be nearly enough to get him tipsy. It was however enough to keep him from noticing the figure sneaking up on him from behind, silently stalking closer and closer until they were in range to strike. In the blink of an eye, Naruto's vision was enveloped by darkness by a pair of paw-like hands while the unknown person sidled themselves up against him. He tensed upon feeling a large pair of breasts smoosh against his shoulder blades while the newcomer's breath tickled his neck. Guess who? Any worry the whiskered blonde had immediately melted away into surprise when a soft yet heavy voice that had a mild accent whispered teasingly into his ear. Nala. The voice giggled as the hands blocking Naruto's sight moved, with the otherworldly young man wasting no time whirling around to face his assailant, his lips almost instantly split into a huge smile upon seeing a familiar lioness yokai standing before him with an amused smirk of her own. Long time no woe, was as far as Nala was able to get before Naruto pulled her into a hug, both of them bursting into laughter as he twirled her around. Oh, it's great to see you again Nala, it's been way too long, he said between chuckles after he set the tan-furred feline back down. As his initial excitement winded down though, he scratched his cheek as he tilted his head in confusion, especially when he noticed her wearing a matching set of chef wear. Not that I'm not happy that you showed up, but what are you doing here? And why are you wearing our uniform? Well, it would have been bad for to show up for my first day on the job out of uniform, Nala said with a giggle, which only caused Naruto's confusion to grow even more. Upon seeing this, the lioness pulled out a folded-up letter from her apron and flicked it open to reveal an acceptance letter bearing the restaurant's logo. Didn't ol' Stripey tell you? She hired me as a chef so we'll be working together again. Wait really? Swiping the letter out of his old friend's grasp, Naruto's brow knit together as he read it over. Huh, well what do you know, she told me she hired a guy named Ryuji.
She probably wanted it to be a surprise. You know how sneaky she can be when she wants to be. Nala said with a nostalgic giggle while a snort slipped past Naruto's lips. I know all too well. Wiping a pretend tear from his eye, the blonde shook his head before wrapping the lioness in another, much gentler, hug. Well, either way it's still great to see you and it's gonna be awesome working with you again. It'll be just like old times. Oh, I hope so. Nala said with a soft purr as she let herself sink into Naruto's grasp, resting her chin on his shoulder as she wrapped her arms around him as well. However, whilst she was enjoying the feel of the blonde holding her, the lion chef suddenly felt someone staring at her.
Following the feeling, her eyes locked with the burning rage-filled gaze of one doe as the tigress glared daggers at her from the other side of the kitchen. So of course she responded maturely.
By sticking out her tongue while flipping the bird behind Naruto's back. What the fuck is that bitch doing here? Doe had heard the duo's entire conversation. Her ears weren't just for show you know, and she knew for a fact that she did not hire that no good man stealing whore. In fact she had made sure to send a very clear letter of rejection that left no doubt that there was absolutely no way she'd ever even consider doing so. So how in the world did she have the exact opposite? It was impossible. Unless, no, there's no way I could have sent the wrong letter. I made sure to double-check everything when. Doe's eyes widened suddenly in alarm as a particular memory flashed through her mind. 2 days ago it was very late at night and Doe was hunched over a desk filling out letter after letter to be sent to the various applicants she'd interviewed. Finishing up the latest, one of the few that she'd actually be hiring, the striped feline girl wiped her brow with a sigh. Man, this is taking a lot longer than I thought, she mumbled while taking a sip from a cup of coffee, only to grimace when she got a mouthful of nothing but cold bitter dregs. Setting it aside, she grumbled to herself as she rubbed one of her eyes tiredly while grabbing the last applicant file, which also happened to be her least favorite. I still can't believe she had the nerve to apply. Just the sight of Nala's picture caused her already poor mood to worsen, the dark lighting, or just her lack of sleep, making it look as though the image was smiling at her mockingly. Scowling as she grabbed a blank sheet of paper, Doe wasted no time writing up a firm and thoroughly concise message that left in no uncertain terms that there was absolutely no way she'd ever. The tigress jumped in her seat when a terrified scream rang through the apartment followed by several crashing sounds. Lop. Her eyes widening in worry as she recognized the voice, Doe dropped everything and bolted towards the source of the noise. She scrambled through the apartment until she reached the bedroom and yanked the door open, almost ripping it right off the hinges in the process. The room itself looked like a hurricane had blown through, the bed flipped off the frame, almost everything smashed, and debris strewn about everywhere. Her attention though was focused solely on the sobbing bunny girl right smack in the middle of the carnage. Doe was just about to rush in to see what happened. However, she stopped herself at the first step when she realized that Lop wasn't alone. She clung desperately to none other than Naruto with her face buried in his shoulder, sobbing her eyes out while her whole body shook like a leaf. Shush, it's okay, you're safe, nobody's trying to hurt you, he said, speaking barely above a whisper while gently stroking the Leppy's head to calm her down. When that didn't seem to be working, the whiskered teen sighed before a soft soothing humming filled the air. Thankfully that did the trick as Lop's shaking started to slow down and her crying slowly died down to a quiet whimpering. Eventually she drifted off into an uneasy slumber and Naruto carefully stood up with her held in his arms. Once he had a good hold, the blonde quietly made a few clones that got to work straightening up the room while he headed for the door, only to stop when he finally noticed Doe in the doorway. Seeing the confusion and concern written all over the tiger yokai's face, another sigh escaped his lips as he simply mouthed 2 words. Another nightmare. Oh dear, Doe nodded before quietly closing the door and stepping away, doing her best not to make much noise. Only once she was certain she was out of earshot did the tigress let out the weary groan that she'd been holding back as she ran a hand through her hair. While Lop had been doing surprisingly well over the last few days since her arrival, the force-sensitive space bunny was still shaken by the whole ordeal. Almost every night so far she'd either wake up screaming in the middle of the night, often losing control of her powers like she just had, or she'd end up snuggling in bed with Doe and or Naruto. And while the tigress was happy to comfort the poor girl in her time of need, it was obvious that she needed some serious professional help. So as she sank back into her chair at the desk, Doe pulled out her cell phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the one she wanted, then holding it up to her ear while it rang. Ring ring re-click. Heyo. Bowsy here, who's this? Oh good you're up, Doe sighed in relief, half-mindedly tucked the letters she'd been writing into their envelopes to be mailed in the morning as she spoke. Hey sis, it's Do. Sorry to call you up so late but I need your help.
Present. Stupid. I must have gotten the letters mixed around when I was talking to Bowsy. It took all of Do's strength to keep herself from bashing her head into the wall as she berated herself for her mistake. Now she was stuck dealing with the one person she didn't want anywhere near her, Naruto, working alongside him every day.
And based on the smug look that Nala was still giving her behind Naruto's back, the lioness was well aware of this too. Meanwhile, Diane's office, 10 minutes till opening. Yes ma'am. Earliest available spot is Wednesday at 9:45 p.m. I'm sorry but we really do not have anything sooner. Yes I'm certain. Okay then, so party of 4. Understood. Is there anything else? And she hung up. Diane shook her head with a bemused sigh as she put the phone back on its stand and finished typing in the information for the newest reservation. Sheesh, and I thought people were impatient back in LA. Maybe Do and I did too good a job of marketing this place? They'd only just started accepting reservations a few hours ago, yet they were already fully booked up for the next 3 days. It was to be expected though, considering they had not one but 2 of the most renowned and popular chefs in the country running the place. So now she was stuck dealing with the many would-be customers that did not want to accept this fact and were all too eager to voice their displeasure at being told they had to wait. Bah. Better too many customers than too few. The kitsune shook her head and decided to just enjoy this brief moment of calm until the next inevitable call came a-ringing. Stretching her arms above her head, she grunted when her back realigned with a satisfying pop before laying back in her chair and letting her gaze drift over her new office. Modest was the perfect word to describe it, being neither too big or too small, with about half of the space taken up by her desk, a few filing cabinets, and a pair of chairs. Diane had also taken to adding her own little touches, such as putting up a poster of her old home on the wall, and a few knickknacks she'd brought with her from the US were set about. She'd even been able to customize her computer a little, although that mostly amounted to putting a few stickers of her old college on the tower and picking a cute background screensaver. But sadly, the former governor didn't get to enjoy her peace for long before the phone went off once more as expected, forcing her to quickly sit up and answer. Hello and thank you for calling, she started to say, only to be cut off by fast talking on the other end of the line. Yes, that is us. How can I? Once more she was cut off by the caller. Yes, and again. Well, if you'd like to make and yet again. Oh, for crying out loud, could you let me finish a sen? Oh? You want to order a delivery? To help bolster business for the official opening, Naruto and Do had been doing delivery orders for a couple of months already. And thanks to the former's clones, they had a near-flawless record of on-time arrival and customer satisfaction. Apparently it would have been perfect if not for a small incident involving a clone, an oil spill, and a box full of thumbtacks. Diane was soon snapped back to the present when the caller started talking once again.
Ah yes, we're still accepting them. Shall I go through our wedding palette sampler? Are you sure? No, we're not out, I'm just trying to, it's one of our most express. Biting back a scathing retort as the customer continued to keep cutting her off every 2 seconds, the peach-furred fox couldn't help but roll her eyes in exasperation. She could understand if the dude was excited, assuming the guy was planning to get married considering his order choice, but he could at least let her do her job. Whilst this was going on, one of Naruto's clones walked in, looking like it needed to speak with her, but quickly took a seat without a word when it noticed she was on the phone. I understand, sir. If that is all, then I'll just need your name, an address to receive the delivery, date you'd like it to be delivered, and your payment information. Thankfully, by some small miracle, the caller finally kept quiet long enough for her to get a word in edgewise. At the same time, Diane pulled up an order form on her computer, filling out the type of order and costs. And how do you spell that? Alright, and the address? Yes, we deliver to the underworld. Alright. Then when would? Next week. Yes, yes we take. Alright, got it. That should be all. Thank you for business and I hope you are satisfied with your order. Almost as soon as those words left her mouth, a cross look formed on the fox's face and she pulled the phone away from her ear like it burned her. Her lips curling into a scowl, she may have put it back on its stand with just a tad more force than necessary. Pervert. Tough customer I take. Naruto's clone asked rhetorically, earning itself a dry look from Diane before she rolled her eyes once again and focused back on her work. Less tough, more irritating, especially how he kept referring to himself in the third person for some reason, and I could have done without him offering to satisfy me, she grumbled while typing in the last few details and forwarding it to the original blonde to be completed. Once she was done, the suit-clad yokai took a few deep breaths to calm down before continuing. So what can I do for you? Does Do or Naruto need something? Sort of, the duplicate said, making a so-so motion with his hand as he spoke.
Boss told me to let you know that Luna accidentally got into the Dragon Heart and we're down 8 ounces. I'm sorry, she accidentally got into the third most expensive alcohol this place carries? The stuff that's supposed to be kept in a reinforced locked case unless being served? Diane asked incredulously, to which the shadow clone nodded his head. How? Well, she does have a key, being a bartender and all, see, Naruto stated with a shrug. Boss just forgot to warn her how much that stuff cost beforehand, so she didn't think it was a big deal to help herself. That's been fixed though. Oh, I'm sure it has. Sarcasm dripped from the kitsune with each word while she unlocked a drawer on her desk and pulled out a thick ledger. At least until the next time she causes trouble. Come on, Diane, don't be so harsh. I know that foxes and hounds don't usually get along, but she's not that bad. That has nothing to do with it, Diane stated with a huff, her tail swishing behind her rapidly in clear annoyance as flipped through pages until she found the one she was looking for. Grabbing a red pen out of a holder, she quickly jotted down the loss before slapping the whole book shut and tucking it away, making sure to lock the drawer back up tightly. Didn't she almost maul your arm off just to avoid getting a few shots? Yes, but in her defense, Luna's terrified of needles and wasn't given a choice about them. The whiskered teen pointed out, frowning as he recalled that little incident. A day and a half ago, apartment 6F. Am I the only one that thinks this is a bit excessive? Naruto asked with a dull look, flinching slightly with his face scrunching up in a pained grimace as he spoke. The reason for both his question and pain was due to the very angry hellhound he was holding in a headlock on an old couch whilst she clamped her jaws deep into the forearm of his free arm. Luna was growling in pure fury as she furiously dug her teeth into the blonde's flesh, jerking left and right with all her might trying to rend the limb off. Yet Naruto's grip never wavered as he kept the demonic canine's head firmly in place even as his blood poured down both his arm and her chin. She would have probably also been ripping his face off if not for the pair of clones sitting on her back, one holding her hands down and another keeping a firm hold on her thrashing tail. Meanwhile, a third clone was on the other side of the table holding her legs while GU prepped several injections. Shish, easy Luna, it's gonna be okay. Back at Luna's head, Veronica rolled up in her wheelchair and gently scratched the demon dog's head to hopefully calm her down. It's just a quick little poke, then we can have some drinks, buy ourselves some good shit and get totally shit-faced. This seemed to work a little bit as Luna's hackles lowered a tiny bit and she stopped thrashing as much, though she was still growling quite aggressively. But seriously, is this really necessary, Tang? Given a little breathing room, Naruto turned his head to the last occupant of the room, a tall horse-like yokai covered black and white fur with long blonde hair that covered one of her eyes. The now named Tang was a police officer, if the peaked cap atop her head and badge hanging from her waist was to go by, and also another one of Do's many sisters, as evident by the iconic red dress she wore. I'm sorry for dragging you into this, Naruto, she mumbled softly, just barely above a whisper, tapping her hoof-like fingers together as she stared at the floor shyly. But getting these shots is mandated in her parole. She was supposed to get them when she was first let out, but, well. The doctor was too scared to even try after Luna flipped her shit when she saw me getting them. Veronica finished for Tang, still petting the hellhound's head to keep her calm, getting the horse lady to nod her head. Yeah, that, so the parole board gave her 60 days to get the shots on her own. That was 2 months ago, she has to get these now, otherwise, I'll have to take her in for violating her parole. I get that part, but why? This still seems pretty extra. Because demons like us are natural super spreaders for mortal diseases. Why do you think people call us the bringers of pestilence? Veronica cut the blonde off with a dry look. Oh, right, makes sense. I'll shut up now. Alright. First up, the penicillin shot, keep her steady, GU told the clone holding Luna's legs, who nodded before closing his eyes as the snake girl pulled down the hellhound's shorts just enough to expose a butt cheek. Wiping a spot down with an alcohol wipe, she carefully removed the safety cap on the needle and lined it up, and, there. Hee-yee-I. Tang and Veronica both flinched as Luna yelped extremely loudly the instant needle met flesh, before thrashing even more with a wild look in her eyes. The latter was forced to wheel back when the enraged demon dog managed to get Naruto's arm out of her mouth and snapped at her wildly. I'm gonna fucking kill you assholes. Let me go right now. I'll rip your guts out. Thankfully, Naruto and his clones were able to keep her put until she tired herself out and she flopped back down with a pitiful whimper. There we go. See, that wasn't so bad, Veronica said, rolling back closer to continue rubbing the hellhound's head once Naruto had her gagged again. Fuff-voo. Luna mumbled around the arm in her mouth, though she had at least stopped growling. Okay then, 1 down, 5 more to go. Waff, never mind. Present. So it was either get the shots or go back to prison, huh? Sounds like she'd have preferred prison. Diane stated dryly, before cocking a brow when Naruto's clone shook his head. She was the one who asked me to hold her down for the shots, said, and I quote, "Make damn sure I get those fucking things because there ain't no fucking way I'm ever going to the Satan damn place again." Wait, she asked you to make sure she got them and then tried to rip your arm to stop you from giving her them? If she had a hairline, the kitsune's eyebrow would have disappeared into it from how high it rose up. How does that make sense? Since when does anyone who's scared out of their minds make sense? The whiskered teen countered, making Diane frown but nod in agreement. So is that why you're letting her drink on the job? Partially, but only as long as she doesn't have enough to get herself drunk, which I'm not too worried about, the clone said with a chuckle. Boss took everyone out for drinks after the shots and it took almost 3 cases of whiskey just for Luna to get buzzed and she kept griping how weak it was. Guess liquor on Earth ain't as strong as down in the rings.
If you say so. It was clear by the tone of her voice that Diane wasn't exactly convinced, but she allowed the matter to drop for the time being. Well, that and the phone was ringing again, meaning she actually had to get back to work again. Hello and thanks for calling. Yes, that's us. How can I? Here we go again. Restaurant entrance, 5 minutes till opening. Naruto and Do stood side by side with smiles on their faces as they looked at the people all lined up outside the door just waiting to get in.
You know, I almost can't believe that we're finally here already, the whisker-faced young man said, chuckling softly as he wiped the corner of his eye. Feels like only yesterday we bought this place up. Remember? Oh, I remember all right. I remember thinking this was the sorriest dump I ever laid my eyes on and you told me. Anyone can buy some generic cookie-cutter place fresh off the lot, but we're gonna make this place all our own. The couple said together before bursting into laughter at the same time, Do leaning onto Naruto for support as they reminisced. That had to be the cheesiest line you ever said, and I loved it so much, the tigress said between giggles as she rested her head against Naruto's chest, purring in sync with his heartbeat. So is it everything you imagined it'd be?
Almost, the blonde stated with a sigh while wrapping an arm around his girlfriend's waist in a hug as they watched the last few minutes till opening slowly tick by. At the 1-minute mark he reached over and pressed a small button that was covered by a lockable case, causing the sign of their restaurant, Fluffy Foods Fantasia, to light up. Each of the words was stylized differently, Fluffy shaped as giant marshmallows, Foods as different types of ice cream, and Fantasia as cake getting a slice taken out, all above their logo of a chibi fox and chibi tiger riding on cinnamon roll-shaped cloud. There's just one thing missing. And what is that, love? Do asked curiously, before blinking when she felt Naruto lacing his fingers with hers. It wasn't him holding her hand that was surprising though, rather the hard velvety lump she felt sandwiched between hers and his. His smile growing at the adorable look of confusion on the cat yokai's face. Naruto slowly raised their hands up together, before pulling them apart just enough to reveal the little black box clasped between them. Knowing that you'll always be by my side, no matter what. The world went silent for Do, her heart skipping a beat the instant her gaze laid upon the tiny velvet-covered box sitting in the palm of her and Naruto's hand. Her eyes grew wide and her jaw dropped like a stone as everything in the world just stopped existing to her except her, the blonde, and that box. Eventually, after what felt like an eternity, she tore her gaze from it to look at Naruto, who was still smiling at her. Naruto, are you, is this? She couldn't even finish her question, the words seeming to get stuck in her suddenly very dry throat. Not that Naruto minded at all as he gave her a kiss on the forehead with a soft chuckle before using his thumb to guide hers to the case's lid. With a gentle flick the lid popped open to reveal a rose gold engagement ring with the top crafted into a pair of intertwined hearts inlaid with diamonds. And at the very center of the hearts was a pair of orange diamonds that glistened in the light of the sign. Yes I am and yes it is, he said softly yet confidently as he plucked the ring from its case and held it up, though the slight shaking of his hand belied his inner nervousness. So, what do you say, Do? Shall we take this next step together? Absolutely, love. Do was nearly blinded by how brightly Naruto smiled upon hearing those two words as she let him slip the ring on her finger. Looking at it again, tears of pure joy started to well up in the tigress's eyes before she threw her arms around Naruto's neck and pulled him into a deep kiss. The now empty ring box clattered to the floor as the couple held each other close, either unaware or not caring of the muffled cheers and camera flashes from the other side of the doorway from customers that had seen their little moment. Nor did they pay any mind to Luna making a "gag me" gesture behind the bar until Barclone nudged her back to work. As much as both of them wanted that moment to last forever though, the chime of the clock soon brought them back to the present. Well, looks like it's time. Shall we open our doors, love? Do asked with a grin that Naruto shared. I do believe we shall, he said as he gave her another kiss before they walked to the doors together, still holding each other close. After the blonde undid the lock they each grabbed a handle, sharing one last loving look, and pulled the doors open wide. Welcome to Fluffy Foods Fantasia, please come on in and. Yes.
Naruto and Do were caught by surprise as tall, very well-endowed blonde woman with fox ears and 9 fluffy tails dressed in a shrine maiden outfit burst through the crowd of people. Lady Yusaka. Mom. Do and Naruto said at the same time before they were scooped up in the woman's arms, their faces buried into her sizable chest as she excitedly twirled through the restaurant. Yes. 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 You're getting married. Oh, it's about time. End chapter. Omake flashback. Asking her out, Naruto was nervous. More nervous than any other point in time throughout the years of his life. Today was Do's birthday, and he only knew this after getting the info from Nala, something she oddly seemed reluctant to share with him. In the fridge in the kitchen, behind a majority of the food used for work, was a cake he had personally baked just for this day. Having worked with Do for almost a year at this point, Naruto wanted to make her birthday special. It wasn't just to celebrate, but it was also a means for him to thank her for everything she had taught him. Meat prep, veggie prep, seasoning, appetizers, desserts, and so much more. He thought the cooks at Yusaka's home knew their stuff, but they had nothing on her. She's amazing, he mused internally, knowing that what he felt for the tiger yokai was much deeper than his so-called feelings for Sakura. What he felt for his old teammate was simple attraction, a puppy crush, if you will, but when it came to Do, he would proudly admit, to anyone but her, at least, that he had fallen for the cool-headed woman. She was smart, talented, gorgeous, and she even started to find some amusement in his more childish moments. Seeing her smirk, and hearing her chuckle when he did something silly or stupid never failed to make his heart flutter or his cheeks turn a bit red. He was slightly distracted through the day's shift, making small mistakes here and there that, sadly, got Do a little annoyed with him. He played it off by saying he hadn't slept well the night before, which wasn't exactly a lie. 4 failed attempts at her birthday cake, all of which were in his trash back home, would attest to his excuse. After getting his act together, he knuckled down for the rest of his shift until closing time, helping with the cleanup of the kitchen. When they finished, most of his fellow co-workers had already gone home, and a couple others were bidding good evening to them. Hey, Do, he spoke up, seeing her put on her coat in the locker room of the restaurant. She hummed back, giving him an inquisitive glance. You mind hanging back for a bit? I wanted to give you something. She raised a brow at his nervousness, having grown used to his confident attitude and cheerful persona. The man before her looked almost anxious about something. Okay, she replied. I'll wait by the bar. Right, Naruto bid, watching her leave the kitchen. When she was out of sight, he went to the fridge and pulled out her cake before placing it on a tray and covering it with a lid. Taking a breath to steel his nerves, he whispered to himself, this is it, Naruto, don't wuss out, now. Carrying the covered dessert out of the kitchen, he headed for the bar and started humming the birthday song as he approached Do. She turned to him with a look of slight surprise, which he took as a win as he placed the covered tray on the bar top in front of her. Happy birthday to you, he finished the song vocally. I made you a cake last night, and I was worried about how you'd like it. That's why I was distracted so much today, he added, coming clean about what had happened. Naruto, she muttered softly, you didn't have to do that. I know. But I wanted to. You've done so much for me since I started here, and I wanted to show you my appreciation. Doing something for your birthday was the kick in the ass I needed to actually do it. She smirked softly at that. You gonna show me your efforts, then? Nervousness rising once more, Naruto nodded and grabbed the lid by the top handle before lifting it to reveal the personal-sized cake. His eyes were closed, not wanting to see her expression at what was written in icing. Do curiously eyed the cake, smelling it to be chocolate with a vanilla icing on top, despite the orange coloration of the sugary spread. However, it was the words written in red icing that caught her immediate attention. Happy birthday, Do, will you go out with me? Did he really just, she mused, looking to the blonde human out the corner of her eye and spotting his closed eyes and nervous stature. Well, gotta give him some credit, this took balls. Do you like it? She heard him ask, noting that he had yet to open his eyes. It's chocolate cake with vanilla icing, and I used orange food coloring to have the colors match your fur. The red icing is meant to match that dress you wore during the Christmas party here at the restaurant. I also tried to. Naruto, she cut off, knowing that his nerves were making him start to ramble. Look at me. Swallowing heavily, his eyes slowly opened to the sight of her, giving him a straight look. Yes. Let me just say, right now, that this, she gestured to the message on her cake, was stupid. Ballsy, but stupid. He winced at her blunt review of his attempt to ask her out, and he was afraid that this had ruined the friendly relationship that they already had. Did I ask too early? Or is she not looking to date right now? Or maybe I? Stop ranting in your head and listen to me, she cut off his thoughts, having seen his small panic attack on his face. When she had his attention, she continued, "Look, I appreciate you doing this for me, and I'll admit that I've enjoyed working with you and teaching you what I know. You're also a really nice guy. Sometimes a little bit too nice, but it's sweet to see." Despite wanting to blush at the compliments thrown his way, Naruto was waiting for the inevitable rejection. He'd seen this plenty of times back in the Hidden Leaf, in some of the novels he's read, and in some of the movies he had watched. Right now, his heart was begging for her to just get it over with. And, well, she continued before, to his surprise, her cheeks dusted slightly red. "I was actually thinking of asking you out sometime. You just beat me to it." "I did what now?" he mumbled, his brain fried from what was happening. Snorting in amusement, she clarified, "What time will you pick me up?" It took a moment for him to reboot his brain, and when it did, he was a brilliant red at her accepting his request to take her out. I'm free right now," he attempted. Smirking at him almost sensually, she stood up and replaced the lid on her cake before handing him the tray. "Now's good. Put that back in the fridge and we'll go to a bar down the street." His legs were cemented where he stood as he watched her grab her handbag and head to the doors of the restaurant. She stopped and looked over her shoulder, piercing him effortlessly with a smoldering eye. "You coming?" she asked with a smirk, prompting him to rush to the kitchen to put the dessert back and grab his things. He had the guts to try something different when asking me out, and at least he isn't slobbering over my body all the time like most guys. "Let's see how you do tonight, Foxy." "Welcome to Fluffy Foods Fantasia, please come on in." "Yes." Naruto and Do were caught by surprise as tall, very well-endowed blonde woman with fox ears and 9 fluffy tails dressed in a shrine maiden outfit burst through the crowd of people.
"Lady Yasaka, Mom," Do and Naruto said at the same time before they were scooped up in the woman's arms, their faces buried into her sizable chest as she excitedly twirled through the restaurant.
Yes. You're getting married, oh it's about time. And now, oh, my baby boy is getting married, I can hardly believe it, this is officially the greatest day of my life." "We heard you the first 100 times, Mom," Naruto mumbled, his cheeks flushed as he dangled in Yasaka's grasp like a kitten while she danced around in the kitchen. This had been going on for nearly an hour now and it didn't seem like it'd be stopping anytime soon.
His clones refused to intervene on the premise that they wished to avoid the same fate, same with his fiancée who'd only just managed to slip free of the ecstatic Kitsune's grasp a few minutes ago. Meanwhile, the rest of his employees just weren't sure what to do about the busty blonde beauty that was manhandling their boss.
"Doesn't this bring back memories?" Nala asked Do with a giggle that the tigress shared as they worked together to prepare orders that were piling in for them thanks to the waiter clones. "Yeah, like the time she thought I was pregnant when I had that stomach bug. I actually thought my ribs were going to be crushed from how tightly she was hugging me." Do sighed nostalgically while drizzling seasonings onto a steak that she was about to sear, getting the lioness to snort in amusement. Her gaze kept drifting to the ring currently hanging around her neck on a chain, as she couldn't wear it on her finger while preparing food, which just made her happier every time she saw it.
It may seem odd to some that the two of them were talking so amicably after being so hostile towards each other earlier. Well, it was true that they may absolutely despise each other at times, mostly due to their shared love interest, but that didn't mean they couldn't get along outside of that. Okay, they also made a mutual pact to keep their rivalry out of the workplace so as to not mess things up for Naruto.
There's so much to get ready. There's the venue, the theme, oh, and of course the dress. Yasaka squealed at the top of her lungs, her tails wagging so fast that a passing clone was nearly blown off his feet by them. "I know Mom, I know, now could you please put me down? I have work to do," the whiskered boy in her grasp said as he squirmed desperately for freedom. However, the busty blonde's grip was like a bear trap, refusing to budge even a centimeter no matter how hard he pushed. "I can already see it. A lovely beach wedding in the sunset, ooh, or maybe a classic chapel one with flower petals raining down from the ceiling." Over on the other side of the kitchen, a quivering Hana was watching her fellow kitsune dance around with wide eyes. Lady Yasaka is Naruto's mother? Yasaka, the leader of the Kyoto, one of the most powerful yokai on the planet, was the mother of her boss and landlord. She tried to offer herself to the son of the Kyuubi of Kyoto. Yes, mother adopted big brother a few years ago. The poor vixen nearly jumped out of her skin when a voice she didn't recognize spoke up right behind her. Her fur puffing out, she whirled around to see a young blonde girl with yellow eyes and 9 small golden tails wearing a red and white Miko outfit standing in the back door. Lady Kuno. Hana squeaked out, shaking from head to toe, before she clapped her hands together and bowed her head respectfully. "It's an honor to meet you." "Ah, and you must be Hana, Naruto told me about you," Kuno said while looking over Hana curiously, humming softly under her breath as the older kitsune squirmed under her gaze. The Silverette's nervousness skyrocketed upon hearing that Naruto had actually talked about her to his family. What if he told them about what she tried to? He's right, you are adorable. All thoughts in Hannah's head came to a screeching halt. Adorable? That's what I said, isn't it? Now, not to be rude, but shouldn't you be working right now? The young Nine-Tails pointed out, gesturing to the tray of food that was just waiting to be brought to hungry customers. This caused the single mother to flinch before she bowed and left without a word, her tail literally between her legs as she scurried off to do her job. Sheesh, he wasn't kidding about the skittishness either. She looked like she was gonna need a new pair of pants if I didn't give her that out. Shaking these thoughts out of her mind for now, Kuno continued her way towards her mother and brother. As she stepped all the way through the door though, it was revealed that the fox girl was not alone as she pulled along a little red wagon behind her, and in said wagon was yet another Kyuubi. However, unlike Yusaka, Kuno, and even Hana, this Kyuubi was completely fox in appearance. Napping atop a luxurious plush pillow, it was about the size of an average fox with its 9 tails coiled around itself haphazardly. Its fur was a predominant deep orange-red color with black marks over its eyes that stretched across its long ears. Sniffing the air, one of its eyes cracked open to reveal a glowing red eye that lazily looked around for a few moments before shutting again with a soft huff. Mom, Kuno snapped her fingers loudly while she approached, getting Yusaka to finally snap out of her ramblings about weddings. As exciting as it is that Naruto finally dug up the nerve to propose, I'm pretty sure he does need to actually get to work. It being the grand opening of his restaurant and all that. Oh right. I'm so sorry. Naruto dropped onto his own 2 feet once more when his adoptive mother let her hold go slack. She scratched her cheek with a sheepish giggle while the whiskered teen tried to straighten up his uniform. I got a little carried away there, didn't I? No more than I thought you would, Naruto said with a chuckle that Kuno shared as he smoothed out the last few creases on his apron, causing Yusaka's cheeks to gain a faint embarrassed blush. Usually the bodacious blonde was quite calm, dignified, and a touch flirty at times, but when it came to her children she had a habit of getting a little, very over-emotional at times. She didn't have long to dwell on these thoughts though before she was suddenly thrown for a loop when her son suddenly spun around and wrapped her up in a hug of his own. And I wouldn't have it any other way, Mom, he murmured, making Yusaka blink before a tender smile spread across her lips as she returned the hug. I think I'm gonna be sick. Don't be such a grump, Uncle Kurama. I know you're happy for him too. Kuno chided the kitsune in the wagon when he made a mock gagging sound. Scoffing, the now named Kurama rolled over on his pillow and buried his head underneath his tails. I could care less if that loud idiot decided to get hitched or not. I love you too, buddy. Said, idiot, retorted as he and his mother broke their hug, the blonde snorting in amusement when the kitsune held up 2 of his tails, the second one curled up to give a near-perfect imitation of a hand flipping the bird. Shaking his head, Naruto flipped the fox off back while gently ruffling his little sibling's hair with his free hand. And thanks sis, pretty sure I would have been stuck like that all night if not for you. You're kidding right, you'd have been lucky if she'd let you go within the week. Kuno stated with a dead serious look, before they both burst into fits of laughter while Yusaka pouted. I'm not that bad, yes you are, nobody asked you. So, they're the ones who took you in when you got here? Lop asked a clone by the sinks as she dropped off a large stack of dirty dishes for him to wash. Mom and sis gave boss a place to stay and helped him get on his feet, the whiskered duplicate said with a nostalgic laugh. It was supposed to only be for a few weeks but as you've probably guessed, things didn't exactly go to plan. The mom and sis part kinda gave that away, the Leppy admitted, giggling softly as well, before pausing out of the blue as one of her ears twitched. Her head tilted cutely to the side as she looked around in apparent confusion. Is someone supposed to be playing a flute? A flute? No, there shouldn't be. Dishwasher Naruto said unsurely, his face scrunching up in thought as he tried to remember if his creator had made a music clone. He could in case some customers wanted live music to enjoy their meals but as far as he knew a flute wasn't one of the instruments he could play well yet. In fact, the only one his creator knew who could play a flute was, oh boy. Oh boy. Lop repeated in confusion which only continued building up when the clone suddenly doubled over with an amused yet exasperated sigh. Why? The otherworldly rabbit girl was abruptly cut off by the back door getting kicked open, allowing a mouse girl in a familiar red dress to strut in while playing a daisy. She was very short, barely over 4 feet tall, although she looked a bit taller thanks to her large ears with short black fur and 2 long braids. Oh here we go. Do muttered dryly, though her apparent annoyance was belied by the smile on her lips. Only once she was all the way inside did the mouse yokai stop playing, twirling her bamboo flute dramatically before tucking it under her armpit and posing cutely with a salute. Heyo, Zima Shinzo is in the building. Hey Zima,
I was wondering when you'd show up. Naruto waved to the musician, who smiled brightly and jumping onto the blonde, wrapping her arms around his neck. Though due to the height difference between them, this left her comically dangling in the air, not that she seemed to mind one bit. Was starting to worry you wouldn't make it actually.
And Monsieur Indo's big night. Fat chance, Jima exclaimed with a shake of her head, planting a kiss on Naruto's cheek before letting herself drop back to the floor. Not 2 seconds later she squeezed herself between Do and Nala so she could give the former a hug too. And I gotta say, you guys really knocked it out of the park. This place looks amazing. That's what we were going for. The tigress said while patting her sister on the head. Now, where's Woohoo! A fluffy brown furred dog lady charged into the kitchen and jumped at Naruto, who reflexively caught her by the waist. Opening day. It's here, woo. And you're energetic as always, huh Bowsy? Rolling his eyes good-naturedly when the canine yokai just cheered again in his grasp, Naruto held her close so she could give him the hug she was desperately trying to. A sigh escaped his lips when Bowsy immediately latched onto him and buried her head in his shoulder to nuzzle while her tail wagged like crazy. Hey, no hogging. It was not to last though as she was abruptly yoinked away a few seconds later by a pair of twin ox girls. They looked almost identical reflections to each other with long black hair, one up in ponytails and short gray fur, even having mirrored horns, with one having her horn cut down to the base on her left side and the other on her right side. However, there were a few subtle differences that helped tell them apart. The one who spoke was the one with short left horn, also had a very cute little tail, a little ribbon on her untrimmed horn, large breasts, and her bangs loose so they dangled over her forehead. She exuded a lot of confidence, smiling widely as she tossed a pouting Bowsy aside to a clone. Meanwhile, the ox girl with a short right horn had a much longer tail that reached her knees, a more petite chests, and all her hair tied back properly. And unlike her mirrored counterpart, this girl was a lot less outspoken, shrinking into herself a bit while tapping her knuckles together shyly. Oh Xingyun, Bingon, hey, and for some reason Naruto seemed very nervous upon seeing the two of them, sweat beading up on his brow as he took a step back from the pair. Hello to you too, big boy, it's been far too long, Xingyun, the confident one, purred out while sidling up to the nervous blonde and nuzzling against his side, intentionally mushing his arm between her breasts. Naruto tried to take another step back but was cut off by Bingon, who quietly latched onto his other side with a blush. It's good to see you again, it's a pretty big day today, we should really celebrate this in style, don't you think? There was absolutely no doubt in anyone's mind exactly how Xingyun wanted to celebrate, as she playfully danced her fingers across the whiskered teen's chest. Xingyun, we've talked about this, Naruto said with a sigh, wriggling an arm free so he could swat the seductive yokai's hand away. I'm not interested in joining one of your little wrestling matches, that is final. Oh come on, how do you know if you don't try it out at least once? We'll even go easy on you since it'd be your first time. Pinky promise, Bingon whispered softly, one of her hands slowly inching up the bottom of his shirt until he swatted it back too. Do, little help here please. The whiskered blonde pleaded to his fiancé as his face slowly turned redder and redder, especially when Xingyun started wiggling her tongue in very suggestive manners. Fwa wop asterisk. Ow. Owie. Thankfully, he was saved when a ladle shot out and whopped both ladies on the head before boomeranging back into a less than amused Do's hand. That's enough you two, knock it off or I'll bust out the ice baths. Ow, Killjoy, Xingyun grumbled, rubbing the growing welt on her head while shooting her feline sister a dirty look, though she reluctantly let Naruto go. However, her frown swiftly flipped right back to a grin not even a second later as she glanced at Bingon, who was still clinging to the blonde. Alright, we'll stop, right after this. With no warning the right-horned ox girl grabbed the front of Naruto's shirt and pulled him down to eye level. The otherworldly young man only had enough time to grunt in surprise before his lips were locked by hers in a deep kiss. His eyes went wide when he felt her tongue slipping right into his mouth and started pillaging every crevice it could reach. Before his brain could even process what was happening, it completely short-circuited when a slender hand snaked into his pants, slipping right under his underwear and grabbing a hold of little Naru. If you ever change your mind, Bingon whispered into his ear while quickly yet masterfully stroking him off, getting him up to full mast almost instantly with her tender touch. Oh my! Yasaka quickly clapped her hands over Kunu's eyes as her jaw dropped to the floor like a stone. Meanwhile poor Lop and Hannah ended up walking right into each other while carrying pitchers of water, dousing themselves in cold water. And yet even then they still couldn't stop themselves from watching. Here we go again. Kurama muttered with an amused snort, propping his head up on his tails for a better view of the drama unfolding. That does it. Everyone flinched at the sheer volume of Do's voice as the tigress glared bloody murder at her oxen siblings. Reaching into a nearby cupboard, she ripped out the biggest fucking cleaver any of them had ever seen and held it over her head with a menacing growl. Breaking the kiss, all of Xingyun's prior confidence vanished as she and Bingon gulped nervously at the sight of the colossal meat-carving knife. And that's our K to leave, later Naru. And like that the pair were gone, bolting for dear life with one very angry feline hot on their tails. Get the fuck back here, I'm gonna turn your asses into beef stew. Back to work. Naruto said when he noticed everyone staring at him, coughing into his hand to clear his throat as he awkwardly tried to hide the tent in his pants. 2 minutes 32 seconds, that's got to be a record for those two to piss off dough. Yet another new voice stated before 3 more ladies waltzed in through the back door one after another. The first, and the one who spoke, was a pig yokai with pale ghost white skin speckled with light pink patches and had long brown hair done up in 2 loose braids that framed her face and a long braid that went up behind her before dropping to her lower back. An old straw hat sat atop her head, wedged between her ears, while she held an old-style pocket watch in her hand. The second lady was a rabbit with white fur and hair, the latter being so long that it almost touched the ground. The most defining thing about her though was the pair of large crimson ears that stretched nearly 2 feet tall before folding in half, an inch-thick gold rod with red caps pierced through them both at the folding point. And lastly was a chicken woman, covered mostly in bright red plumage with black feathers on her arms and tail while white ones covered her lower mouth. She also had a mix of white feathers and thick white hair atop her head that was mostly tied together into a big afro-like ball with a single braid that draped off the top. And unlike all her siblings, she was adorned in a white t-shirt with matching shorts rather than the usual red and gold dress. "Oh hey Yumi, long time no see." Nala called to the pig woman cheerfully, to which she got a wave back. "Hey Nala, good to see you too, happy opening day and all that," Yumi said, stuffing her watch away and giving the lioness a high five. "Sorry we're late but we had trouble fitting everyone into the car." In hindsight it was poor planning to expect 6 people to easily fit into one convertible. The bunny girl stated, speaking barely above a whisper as she crossed her arms. "Well, it was only supposed to be 3 people, Miantiao," the feathered lady stated while giving the now-named Miantiao a dirty look, who didn't even blink at the accusation. Maybe if somebody hadn't changed their mind at the last minute it wouldn't have been such a big hassle getting everything going. "I do not have any regrets," was all the rabbit woman said, her voice and expression ever stoic as she brushed past her sister. Walking across the room, Miantiao stopped before Yasaka and respectfully bowed her head. "Lady Yasaka, Kuno. A pleasure to see you both again." "And you as well Miantiao," the older kitsune stated with a soft smile, while her daughter simply waved politely. "How have you been doing?" "Well enough, thank you," the rabbit bowed again before turning to Naruto with her yellow eyes turning a glowing blue. The reason for this was soon revealed as a similar glow enveloped Naruto and he slid towards her as if being dragged when she flicked her wrist. Once he was close enough, the glow faded away on both of them before Miantiao slipped herself under one of the blonde's arms. "And hello again to you too Naruto, it's been much too long." "It was only a week and a half," he mumbled with a sheepish chuckle, his blush dying away to a light dusting on his cheeks as he scratched the back of his head. "Much too long," the telekinetic bunny yokai repeated while resting her head against his chest, humming softly in approval when the blonde gently rubbed the top of her head. A tired sigh escaped her lips as she just seemed to deflate against him, little bags becoming a lot more noticeable under her eyes. The little ones were very restless, they missed their favorite uncle a lot. "Is that so? I guess I'd better make it up to them and you later then," Naruto said, getting a soft mumbled agreement from Miantiao as she nuzzled further into his touch. "Speaking of though, where are those little mischief makers?" "Back in Lizzie's car still, Yumi started to say, heading for the back door as she spoke, only to suddenly get bowled over by several little bunny yokai. Said bunnies then made a straight beeline for Naruto, who sighed in amusement and gently pushed Miantiao aside so he could hold his arms out. And not a second too soon as all of them pounced him, the impact actually making him slide back about a foot as he wrapped them up in a hug. Now that they weren't moving everyone could get a good look at them, 3 of them to be exact. All girls who looked about 2 years old, they looked almost exactly like younger versions of Miantiao only with reversed fur and hair colors. They were also completely identical each other aside from the color of their eyes, with one having vibrant yellow eyes like her mother, one had sky blue like when her mother was using her powers, and the last one had soft violet. "UNC. Shoo-shoo. Bah," they exclaimed at the same time, hugging him together with big smiles on their faces that he just couldn't help but share. "Ha ha ha. Your mama wasn't kidding. You girls must have really missed me, huh?" he asked, getting 3 excited nods in return, before his expression grew serious. "You haven't been giving your mama trouble for that, have you?" "No," they said at the same time again, shaking their heads in perfect sync.
However, this also meant they shared the same guilty looks as they avoided meeting the whiskered blonde's gaze.
Ting, Ping, and Ling Xingzhou, you better not be lying to me, he said with a firm look at each of the girls, his cerulean eyes locking with yellow, blue, and purple gazes with each name. Each one flinched a little and bowed her head but otherwise refused to answer again. After about a minute of this though his gaze softened as he shook his head with a soft sigh. Alright, but if I find out you girls have been, then it'll be no more of my triple layer brownies for a month, got it? Getting 3 little nods, Naruto smiled softly before giving each of them a kiss on the forehead. That's better. Now then, who's hungry? Me. Food. Food. Ba treats. That's what I thought. The whisker-faced blonde said with a chuckle as he carried the triplets off to get them something to eat in the break room, with Miantiao naturally following after them. Almost right as they left the kitchen did Do come waltzing back in, still steaming mad but thankfully no longer armed. She wasn't alone though, as she was followed by a dragon woman with green skin, long ankle-length hair, 4 yellow horns, 1 short and 1 long on either side of her head, who patted her back supportively. You should have let me gut them, Lajiao. Sure I should have, just like the 100 other times you tried to. The now named Lajiao said with an amuzed shake of her head as while guiding the tigress back to her workstation. A small amount of warm steam oozed out of small holes that were peppered all over the greenette's body, washing over her furious sister and soothing her burning temper. I'm with Do. Those 2 morons had it coming for years. A goat lady said as she stumbled along behind them holding the tigress's cleaver in one hand and a bottle of sake in the other. With short gray fur and a pair of plain horns there wasn't too much distinguishing about her aside from the rope headband she wore, a large fluffy tail, and the permeating scent of high-quality sake that followed her. You're just saying that because you're drunk again, Qingju. Yet another new girl, a monkey girl with blue fur and a long tail that split into 3 at the end, said in a dry tone. Again? That implies I've actually stopped being drunk, Qingju snorted while going to take another swig, only to find her hands suddenly empty. The fuck? Where's my fucking drink, Shilyu? That is not something to boast about, Shilyu stated, holding up the missing bottle with her tail, the 3 ends acting like fingers to grip it, before she tossed it into the trash. Would it kill you not to drink for 5 minutes? Probably, her drunken sister said without hesitation, sticking an arm into her own tail and digging around inside the fluff for several moments before pulling out another bottle. Ripping the cork out with her teeth, Qingju spat it out at the monkey girl with surprising accuracy given her inebriated state, forcing her to catch it with her tail. You're incorrigible, I don't even know what that means. Anyway, Shilyu shook her head and looked around the room, idly tossed the cork into the trash. Which one of you is the real Naruto? None. Boss is helping Miantiao with the triplets. A waiter clone told her while pointing towards the break room, getting a thumbs up from the monkey girls. Tail? A tail's up? Gotcha, I'll go help them too. Those 3 can be more of handful than this drunk at times, she said, jabbing a thumb at Qingju, who flipped her off while chugging down her sake. Great. Do sighed as her fiancé was yet again kept from his job, though at least this time in a way she genuinely couldn't fault him for. But that still left her to deal with most of her siblings who invaded her kitchen, including 2 certain oxen who didn't think she would notice them sneaking back in. Which she did. All that's missing is Gu and Tang for a whole sibling reunion. Heyo, are we late? I just had to jinx it, the tigress facepalmed when said 2 sisters waltzed right in not even a second later. Tonight was going to be a very long night, she could already tell. In the break room, half an hour later Ting, Ping, and Ling were all seated around a small colorful children's table, slapping their hands against it in excitement. Miantiao was nearby in a rocking chair, enjoying a cup of tea while conversing with Shilyu, both making sure to keep a keen eye on the little ones but otherwise allowing themselves to relax. Meanwhile, Naruto, who was out of his uniform, was over at a smaller personal stove stirring a pot, humming a cheery tune under his breath. Alright girls, I hope you're hungry because I made your favorite, he declared as he grabbed a trio of bowls and flipped them onto his arm, balancing them with practiced ease while he ladled the pot's contents into them. Setting it aside, the blonde plucked up a couple pairs of chopsticks and made his way over to the triplets. Said girls stopped their antics almost immediately when they heard Naruto speak, their eyes sparkling as they stared at the bowls in anticipation. My special homemade vegetarian miso ramen with extra soy sauce, Naruto said while kneeling and letting the dishes slide down from his arm onto the table, each one coming to a prefect stop in front of a bunny. Trying to set down chopsticks down beside them, the whisker-faced young man couldn't help but chuckle when the wooden eating utensils were pulled out of his hand by a familiar blue glow and flew into the girls' grasps. Snapping them in sync, they were ready to pounce upon their meals, only to stop when Naruto cleared his throat with a stern look. What do you say first? Ting, Ping,
and Ling pouted impatiently but still put their hands together and bowed their heads a little. Thank for food.
Better, now dig in. The triplets didn't need to be told twice as they all but pounced on their food, broth and noodles splashing everywhere much to Naruto's amusement. Guess we still need to work on table manners.
It's a work in progress, Miantiao said with a nod while Shiryu snorted.
Figures you ended up getting them hooked on that stuff eventually. I swear if it wasn't for dough you'd eat that for every meal. Are you saying you don't want any? Naruto asked coyly while holding up another bowl that was almost instantly swiped from his grasp by the brunette's three-tipped tail. Heck no, she said before eagerly wolfing down the noodle dish, ironically eating even more messily than the little girls were. I wouldn't turn down your cooking even for $1,000,000. That's what I thought, the sole human in the room said with a smirk, setting a plate of salad down for Miantiao, earning a soft thanks from the mother of three as he took a seat beside Shiryu. So how have things been? We haven't seen each other since the family Christmas party. It's been about the same as it always has, traveling the world, seeing the sights, still trying to find that perfect place to set up my dream gym. As she spoke, the monkey girl pulled out her phone, sidling up close to Naruto so she could show him a bunch of pictures. Some were selfies of her, usually hanging around or off of some historic world landmark, others were of funny things, like misspelled signs, but predominantly there were pictures of landscapes. I found a few spots that I really like but I'm just not 100% sure. Like check out this one I found in the US, it's got this nice little lake that'd be perfect for doing laps or relaxing after a workout. Oh, that is nice. Naruto had to agree upon seeing a picture of a clearing in the middle of a forest with a beautiful lakeside view. Yeah, but then there's this one over in Australia. Shiryu swiped the screen to show a red stony landscape with a canyon river. It could be a great spot for people to really build character at, you know? Also true. But then there's this one that, hey Naruto, the monkey lady was cut off before she could show him another picture by Diane, who strolled into the break room carrying several papers. Heading straight for her boss, the former governor handed him an order form. Sorry to bug you on your break but we just got a big order and they paid for express delivery. I tried to give it to one of your clones, but they insisted you'd want to handle this one personally. The blonde raised a brow as he looked over the sheet curiously, his eyes zipping over the paper curiously. After a few moments though they lit up in recognition before he nodded his head with a sigh. Oh, right, the usual Neko special for Kuo. Yeah, I'd better take care of this one myself, thanks Diane. Hopping to his feet, Naruto was enveloped in a puff of smoke which quickly cleared to reveal him back in his work uniform once more. He did a quickly double check of himself, straightening up his apron. No, before he was tackled by Ting, Ping, and Ling once again. Ting grabbed his leg, Ping latched onto one of his arms, and Ling hopped right up to his chest, the three of them clinging to the whisker-faced chef with all their adorable might. Here we go again. Miantiao muttered, her lips briefly curling upwards into a tiny smile. Ah come on girls, none of that, Naruto said as he tried to pry the young bunnies off so he could go. However, every time he managed to get one loose, she'd just clamber right back on while he was trying to get another one free. Ling in particular absolutely refused to budge even an inch, or more specifically he couldn't bring himself to move her whenever he saw her quivering violet eyes welling up with tears staring back at him. I'm sorry but Uncle Naru has to make a delivery real quick, I'll be back before you know it. No, UNC stay. No go ba, but I've got to. The end. Thanks for watching, also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.